There we go. Okay, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to my fans on YouTube and Facebook alike. This is the Crusty Canuck Thursday Fastball with my special guest, Ms. Valerie Keefe. Valerie has a very, very well-educated background in economics, history, I think provincial history too, if I'm not mistaken, as well as the social structure as we see it today. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Valerie Keefe. Welcome, Valerie.
Thank you, Crusty.
Oh, I'll just get rid of some of the banners here. So please tell my audience a little bit about yourself.
Well, let's see. I've been politically involved on some level since I was like 5 years old. And I managed to get playground time more fairly distributed at my elementary school. And I've been hooked ever since on the idea that, you know, if we come together with facts and argumentation, we might actually make the world a less crappy place. When I was in college, which I had to leave because some home stuff happened in my third year, so I got the education of what it's like to know a lot and yet not have a piece of paper that shows that you know a lot, and the consequences of that for someone's life. But when I was in college, I went to MacEwan University for most of it, and I was the first president of the Grant MacEwan New Democrats. I founded the Grant MacEwan New Democrats. And then last month I was banned from the Grant MacEwan New Democrats Facebook page for basically asking, if love wins, why the hell did you lose? Let's see. I ran for the leadership of the Freedom Conservative Party of Alberta last year. I declared on December 15th of 2019. Their constitution required they hold an election by early April. They did not. They instead forced through a merger with Wexit, which I think was a dumb idea in pursuit of a giant screw the system button. You know, and I understand it. You know, people don't think the system's working. So, but like that just doesn't mean that performance is going to fix things. I've turned around a business only to have the job bought out from under me. I have an independent production company, Big Thing Badly Television Productions. We're trying to put together a political procedural that's set in the Twin Cities because Edmonton looks a whole lot like Minneapolis, St. Paul, and also has the same sort of smug, pretend to care but hurt the little guy liberalism problem that Minneapolis, St. Paul does. I was a delegate for David Orchard in 2003, and that's when I came out to myself as a classical conservative. I came out to myself as other stuff later in that decade.
Oh, well done, well done. So you could call yourself basically classical conservative with basically a classical liberalism outlook.
I mean, markets definitely are valuable, but no, I don't consider myself a classical liberal. I think that we don't necessarily embrace change for change's sake. We need a state that is maybe has a somewhat more expansive definition than Carl Benjamin's Night Watchman. You do need some things to keep the trains on the tracks. I like what Mark Blythe says when he says, you know, when he's BOITH, and he predicted the election of Donald Trump and the success of Brexit. He says democracy is asset insurance. You can't have a functioning capitalist economy if you don't contend with some of the ways in which it's not perfectly just. And if you keep your head in the sand with respect to that, well, that's how you get socialists and communists elected, which I don't think either of us want.
No, of course not. No, you know, and like I said to you there on Sunday when we talked about collectivism, you know, if you have 10 people in a survival situation, let's say a plane crash, that's where collectivism is handy, because it's not a matter of who's going to get rich or not, it's who's going to die or not. So when it comes to keeping people alive, the collective thought process is key. Who gets wood? Who's going to build a shelter? Who's going to hunt? Who's going to gather this? Who's going to do first aid? Who's got a medical background? Okay, we do this until we see a plane or a boat that's going to come and save us. But until then, you make yourself comfortable. You do what you can to survive. You eat what you can without eating each other. You know, because, you know, we did study Holodomor just a little bit in school. You know, cannibalism just no doesn't work.
No, that's a good way to get a prion disease. That's...
When you start getting them twitches. You know.
Oh, from Book of Eli. That's a good movie.
That
and
too.
To steal a line from Viva Barnes, you know, there's our first movie reference of the night. Oh yeah, and I agree the bigger the society is, the more collectivism breaks down. That's why Orwell, when he wrote 1984, and Orwell considered himself a Trotskyite. So like the democratic communists out there, and I actually know a good Trotskyite. So there's a few of them.
Oh, in theory,
Called it,
it's fantastic in theory,
yeah,
but in
yeah.
practical means, no, it's not going to work.
Exactly. Well, especially what they are pursuing now. But that Orwell in 1984, the book that Goldstein puts out is The Theory and Practice of Oligarchical Collectivism. That you have a collective, and then who runs the collective? Your dictatorship of the proletariat. That's your new managerial class. They are the new bosses. They just identify as the salt of the earth workers, which we've seen plenty of times before. And that's the real problem is I think what needs to happen these days. I mean, I kind of look at it, and I look at like the fake left, or as I call them, social neoliberals. The Democratic Party, the Liberals, the NDP. If they got their heads out of their butts, they could win 70-30. And if conservatives get our heads out of our butts, we can win 70-30. Right now, we have this good cop, bad cop routine that isn't helping anyone. And one of the things that the fake left needs to learn is that economic collectivism is not the same thing as leftism. If you want to know what left wing and right wing are, go and look at Jordan Peterson explain it on Joe Rogan. Leftists recognize hierarchy as corrupt and seek to critique it and reform it, and right wingers recognize hierarchy as necessary and seek to buttress it. When you get too far right, you get hierarchy for the sake of hierarchy. It's like, oh, this guy's got the money, therefore he must have worked hard. I'm like, no,
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Look at Trudeau's example.
Yes.
He was born into it. His father was born into it. And regardless of whatever encyclopedia or how well immersed they are in English and French, they are not in tune with the Canadian people. They never have been in tune with the Canadian people. You either think like us or else, right? Look at what Pierre did to Western Canada in the 1980s.
Yeah, I go the other way on that one. I mean, it was badly implemented, but by the time the national energy policy was done, we did have majority Canadian ownership of the oil and gas industry again. And
you said
one thing that
did,
yeah, we did, and it's been reprivatized since. It's been sold off again. But I mean, there were some steps in the right direction. And I think what Pierre articulated badly, and I'm one of those odd conservatives. I'm pro Pierre, anti Justin. What Pierre did badly was, one, he didn't articulate it. Two, he didn't reference the fact that we had the national oil program from 1960 to 1970, where we made Ontarians pay double the world price for Alberta oil and gas and Saskatchewan oil and gas. We have the oil industry we have because we literally did make the Eastern bastards freeze in the dark. And that's something that Albertans forget a little bit easily. What we're doing now doesn't make any friggin' sense, but that doesn't mean that there wasn't some value in trying to get control over our oil and gas industry again. Because, I mean, the reason that the dip in the world price of oil in 15 just hammered the Albertan economy and balance sheet is because we stopped being adders of value, and we just ship bitumen to the United States so that the Koch brothers can add value to it. Andrew Nikiforuk gave a really good presentation on this at Parkland in 2018, where he talks about like the Lougheed method was go slow and behave like an owner and add value. And we're not doing that right now. We're shipping the cheapest sludge we can as fast as we can, where we don't need pipelines as much as we need refineries. It matters what goes into the pipeline. It matters if you got $8 a barrel sludge that you have to buy diluent for, or whether or not you have highly refined product, which, by the way, would be a beautiful way to take advantage of the intermittency of some of these alternative energies. Like, you can power a refinery. You don't have to power it 24 hours a day. You can have it crank when the sun is shining hard. You can have it crank when the wind is blowing hard. And in that way, you can have varying load, which gets you a better power grid. There's so much of a better way to do this than, the climate fraud leadership plan of the Notley-crats, which I didn't understand that, because the science is that a ton of methane produces 88 times as much warming in 20 years as a ton of CO2. And I know there's going to be some people who are like, well, climate change is a myth. And I'm like, I'm not surprised that people think that when the government acts like it is, because if you follow the current consensus science, or the official science at least, when you take a coal plant and you convert it to frack gas, you're creating somewhere between 2 and 6 times the warming of the coal plant you replaced. So why would you do that unless, you got a whole bunch of Strathcona sushi suckers who care more about exporting pollution and feeling like they're green and greenwashing everything than they do about actually tackling these problems? Nobody's going after methane first. In fact, they like methane because methane, it's cleaner. And it's like, well, the whole point isn't particulate, is it? Right? Or is it? Like, make up your minds with respect to what it is you want. Like, we have a carbon tax where exports aren't, or imports aren't taxed. So literally, you can emit all you want in the making of goods in China. No problem.
Yeah,
that's distortion. That's not the. I loved watching the debate. Phil DeBrandt called for an emergency debate for us to drop out of the Paris Accord, and I completely supported that because the Paris Accord is nonsensical and focuses on CO2 over methane. And Marie Renaud gets up on her hind legs and is like, Nobel Prize winning economists say the carbon tax is the best way to go. Yeah, what you're doing though, those Nobel Prize winning economists are like, this is not that. Just because you slap a label on something and call it carbon tax or LGBTQ2S plus and sometimes Y inclusion doesn't mean it's the thing. And then we have a neoliberalism problem. And so just because it identifies as fixing the problem doesn't mean it fucking fixes the problem.
Well, any true economist would sit there and tell anybody that incorporating any kind of tax other than, let's say, your basic, let's say a 20% flat rate for every Canadian, any other tax thereafter would be just a cash grab. 2 carbon taxes now. For what? Oh, we're going to save the world. How? What's the plan put in place for that? Are you going to invest in geothermal? Are there panels that can be made that can harness more than 25% of the sunshine's power in a day?
Well,
Are there
that's now
panels?
up from like 2, but yeah.
Well, that's the thing. Are you going to have the panels do that? Are you going to invent a battery that you can sit with a bicycle on for, let's say, an hour and a half out of the day and power your home for 2 days? There's innovations there. We can make batteries, sure, but do we have to do those mines that the copper and lithium produces, right?
Oh,
what's the thing?
Yeah. Speaking of lithium, that was interesting. There's some work by I forget if they're a geologist or petrochemical engineer, but they're working on extracting lithium from our old oil wells in Alberta. And one thing we have a lot of in Alberta is, holes that go down deep into the ground. So
exactly.
there's real opportunities with geothermal. The general idea, I think, with these taxes and their Pigovian taxes, but we're completely screwing this up. And I don't trust the government to do this right anymore, was to make greenhouse gas emitting industries more expensive to create the incentives to do that inventing, because it's not the government's job to invent. When the government tries to pick winners and losers, that's where we get into trouble. And that's the thing where, like, the Notley government's climate fraud leadership plan was, okay, we're going to have a fee and dividend model. Well, actually, no, we're not going to have a fee and dividend model. We're going to have a fee and means tested dividend model. Oh, we're not actually going to have a fee and means tested dividend model. We're going to have a fee and means tested dividend and slush fund that's 1/3 of the money we raise because we like our certain buddies and we want to have some photo ops about how wonderfully inclusive we are model.
And a slap and tickle.
Yeah.
Slap and tickle.
Yeah. It's not even going to be 2/3 fee, dividend and 1/3 slush fund. It goes to half and half. Like, I'll tell you how bad our response to this, if we're taking it seriously and we're assuming that the consensus science is the consensus science, and I can't anymore because there's so many calls to censor people who disagree and have a debate on the science. Because there was a great comment on Adam's stream. A good scientist never stops trying to prove themselves wrong. So when they're like, oh, I think anyone who was arguing on the other side of this should be put in jail. It's like, okay, Bill Nye, who thinks that it's a spectrum.
Well, Miss McKenna did the exact same thing on CTV. Yeah. Kath McKenna said this exact same thing when she was the environment minister. I have no time for people who deny climate change. It's like, well, we have a right to be skeptical. I'd rather sit and listen to Dr. Patrick Moore and actually a trained ecologist and one of the founders of Greenpeace, when Greenpeace actually made a difference when it comes to saving animals, keeping things balanced. You know, they never said, let's ban all worldwide whaling. Let's just be sensible about it. Do we need whale oil anymore to heat our lamps on the east coast of the United States and Canada? Well, no. We have other fuels to do that. Right? So a practical common sense logic, yet we don't see the common sense from the Motley Notleys. We don't see common sense from some conservatives, and we definitely don't see common sense from the Liberals, and especially the Greens. When they sit there and talk about, we're going to save the environment. Well, how? What solution do you have?
Yeah, and then that's the thing where, when McKenna says she doesn't have time for people who deny climate change, it's like the Notley government effectively did. Oh, just because they pay fealty to it, ignoring the damn science but saying you believe in it is not denying climate change. You know, and I, it's so weird because 20 years ago I was very, very firmly in their camp, and the way in which we've eroded democracy and been unwilling to have a debate, I can't in good conscience be as strong on that issue now. So, and this is something that like every leftist needs to freaking learn. And if they should happen to stumble across this podcast, when you don't debate your opposition distrusts you. And for that matter, people who are trying to be objective and neutral observers and be changed by evidence don't trust you. And you don't get what you want. You instead build more resistance. You know, the antidote to free speech or to bad speech is more speech. The antidote to bad politicians are more politicians, you know?
Well, that's the thing. And yet we don't have the means in our parliamentary system to actually really hold these people to account too. Right. And that's my discontent and my anger. And literally, Valerie, I am angry the way how the government rolls now. There's always been that conservative, that blue and red back and forth when I was growing up. Okay. But both parties at the time would come up to a logical decision or a logical conclusion. It may not be perfect for this group, may not be perfect for that group, but there was progress really going forward. Okay. Now, the Mulroney years, okay, and I'll ask you about the Harper thing you mentioned before, but the Mulroney years, he was a real big kiss ass to the American model, the Reaganomics idea, the old staunch Republican idea. Okay, he liked that idea because Mulroney grew up very wealthy, best education, you know, very bilingual, proud of his Irish roots, extremely bilingual, great. Okay. So in that conglomerate of the liberal elites, the Laurentian elites, okay, in the same sense, kissing butts with the Americans when the free trade agreement came through. Because remember the debate, it's because we knew the Canadian industry was going to go belly up and go south, i.e., like I mentioned, Inglis, the big washer, dryer, and refrigerator manufacturer in Toronto. Okay? Once free trade was okay, signed, sealed, delivered, boom, they're gone. A lot of Canadian innovators with the auto industry gone too. Right? There was a big stink about the auto industry going belly up in Oshawa. Luckily, it held on, but now it's gone now too. So when you look at the free trade thing, who is getting the freebies on it? Of course, the American machine, because the conservatives were so kiss ass, or we're going to get a deal of it. Yeah, the conservatives got a deal of it, and some key liberal figures got a deal of it. Not you, not me, not our parents that were working different jobs, or farmers at that time. They were trying to get their crops to market, get their milk to market, get their beef to market, cheese producers, etc. So it wasn't really a good deal. And then now when the liberals try to renegotiate it, it's the exact same thing.
We renegotiated another inch onto that particular dildo. It's preposterous. And you're right about Inglis closing down. It's interesting. It reminded me of what Paul Krugman, who, God, I wish he, he talks about there being derp in people like ignoring reality and how it's happening more on the right than the left. I really wish he would check his own backyard. But what he got his Nobel for was something called New Trade Theory. And it was a belief that nations would actually compete in the production of these big ticket items. And so they have an industrial strategy that was around producing those big ticket items. So to me, it's not a surprise that English shut down, that auto manufacturers and the Golden Horseshoe shut down, because now we've just become a branch plant. We've just become a resource supply for that North American industrial process instead of producing things that we would make for our own consumption and sell abroad. I mean, yeah, you need a little bit of economic nationalism. There's a reason that I was a David Orchard delegate, and they called us all socialists back then. And it's interesting; they're now all beginning to recognize how bad a deal NAFTA was, and that it's not socialist to want to have a functioning free enterprise system instead of letting a few giant players completely destroy markets. Something that
how they treated the NAFTA thing. And it's like they made such a big stink about sticking it to Trump. And it's like, well, you're not dealing with a one-on-one here. You're dealing with one country with another country where people's livelihoods are on the chopping block, American and Canadian alike. Okay.
Yeah.
And then when you get the so-called know-it-alls like the Freelands and her entourage of fucking misspent millennials trying to negotiate a deal with probably the biggest economy next to China in the world, okay, trying to negotiate an actual fair trade deal when it comes to our natural resources, when it comes to our dairy, when it comes to our grains and our cheeses and our meats and our oil, and you're sitting there worrying about sticking it to the man. It's like, well, you're totally missing the point here. You don't have to like the guy you're negotiating with.
No.
But that's the meaning of negotiating. You're not there to debate him. You're not there to engage him on his policy, what he does in his country. That's his business, right? And I just found that whole platform that they were promoting so disingenuous and so un-Canadian per se. They're not looking at the democratic needs of the Canadian people, not looking at the democratic needs that Canadian industry does need without government assistance. They need markets. So they kibosh the markets. For what? It's Canadian. Oh, we're being fair. How are you being fair when you keep throwing gender parity into things? Women do what the hell they want to do. They always have. If they want to get into construction, they can. If they want to get into oil trades, they can. If they want to get into medicine, they can. STEM, they can. The military, they can. Politics, they can. So why all this farble garb of word salads to present to one of the superpowers of the world? And for what? Name me a place where a lady cannot find a job in this country the same as any man.
Well, this is so true. Like what cis feminists, or as I call them, the 2 legs good, 3 legs bad set, call a wage gap is a wage for work condition swap. It really is. Like if a cis woman with a STEM degree is twice as likely to get hired as a cis man with a STEM degree, like equal qualifications.
Oh, 1 second there, Valerie.
Okay. Sure thing. There you go. Okay. I guess we're on hold. Where was I? It's bad when I have no one to bounce off of. But, hi to you too, Zyklon. Oh my, that is actually a spicy name. I should disavow. We'll just go with B, shall we? And Stone, you make some good points. And we should have that debate. One that we've been having since the 1500s when we started enclosing public lands. And beyond that, I'm just going to wait for John to get back. Interesting question, Stone. The old gunpowder plot.
Yes, my apologies, fans of the Crusty Canuck fastball. That was just my wife calling, making sure I'm doing fine. And yes, I am. And if you do like and hear what you see, ladies and gentlemen, please do not forget to subscribe and like and share this all around. My guest tonight is Valerie Keefe. Pardon the interruption there. But if you do enjoy and you want to donate, please feel free to donate. I'll put some headings momentarily up here. And during this broadcast, I'll make sure Valerie gives us her contact information too. So we'll get that out of the way. Everything was just fine. So carrying on with the conversation, yes, we were discussing the whole issue with the NAFTA thing and all that. And some people are weighing in. Good to see you, Zyklon. Mr. Stone Lee, he posts, bomb under the White House. I wouldn't recommend it per se.
No, that would be that didn't work out well for Guy Fawkes and Catholicism in England generally. That's not how you handle this stuff. It really isn't. Yeah. I see no reason the gunpowder treason should ever be forgot.
Yeah. True enough. So please feel free, ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions, you can ask myself or ask Valerie, anything you'd like to know. We don't care if you drop an F-bomb or a C-bomb. By all means, see you next Tuesday is very, very effective use in the English language, as we say today, especially to my ex-British Pats out there that want to drop the odd C-bomb. By all means, feel free to ask us anything you want to know. Like I say, if you want to donate, please go to crustycanuck.ca. You can find my PayPal account and the Buy Me a Coffee application. Any donation will do, $1 to $2 to $5, $10 or more. Please, I'd like to make this a full-time commitment to bring you quality broadcasting, tongue-in-cheek humor, and just great all-around commentary. So.
Yeah, I dropped that word plenty of times, and be rest assured, I'm around to tell you it's not misogynistic. Some girls have penises. Get over it, under it, next to it, whatever orientation you like to prefer.
Well, I'll say it doesn't faze me as long as you just try to be good to people, what have you. My concern, though, that I find with the trans, I guess you can say the trend, is when they start trying to mold kids. Now, my personal belief is that I was never molded to be heterosexual when I was a young boy. I was just told you're a little boy, and that's it. And you just carried on. Sex ed class, okay, we were told, okay, this is a penis, this is a vagina, this is what happens, and all this. And let's say if little Billy is, hits puberty, has his wet dream, and he likes his friend Bobby, well, okay, we got news for you. There you go.
Yeah.
How else do you explain it?
I'll tell you what, I was molded to identify as cishet at every opportunity. Like when my parents saw something that I didn't even know I was dealing with, they did their damnedest to tamp it down. When I was 6, we had Super Mario Brothers 2, which that's I am one of the oldest millennials. Hashtag not all millennials. You're taking shots at us. That's fair enough, though. We are part of the second period, worst period, generation period ever period. I really liked Princess Peach because she had the really good jumps. She had the precision. You could float and then drop right down. And we had a dress like that in our playroom, and I like to play with that for that reason. And it just disappeared. And no, there were all sorts of attempts to toughen me up, man me up. Things I didn't recognize. And my dad would say, it's like, I didn't know what was wrong with you. I told everyone. He acts like a girl. So no, it does friggin' happen. What I don't agree with is the foisting of surgery on minors. But when people are saying, well, I took these hormones as a teenager and, I regret it now. It's like, well, I regret having the ones that my body put out. You should have a puberty at that age. You should have a puberty. There's a reasonable chance you'll regret it either way. Lupron, on the other hand, those hormone blockers, that stuff is literally poisonous. I was talking about it on Danielle Smith when they were talking about adult conversion therapy bans, which, by the way, I'm against because you don't know. Repression tactics might help you. People are free to figure out whatever they want to figure out in the way they want to figure it out. But they had this lady call in and say, well, my daughter was on Lupron and it was no problem. She just needed help walking after she got her injection. And I'm like, 16-year-old needs help walking. And
what the hell did you inject her with? Horse tranquilizer?
No, Lupron. This stuff is off-license lupus medication, and it's supposed to stop puberty from happening. So these are people who, you just won't have a puberty until you're 18. That's not good. That's
No,
not good.
it's not good for
Like,
males or females, you know.
exactly. Like, like I understand there's going to be long-term consequences for picking one, but pick one. And if you like, the side effects of Lupron include liver damage, increased risk of cancer, and mandibular necrosis, which is a nice way of saying jaw rot. And I got to tell you, like, you know, I know some people love their kids and they want to save them from any degree of harm or ostracism in the world. But if you would rather your kid have a hole in their face than look like a tranny, really fucking reevaluate the kind of parent you are. And, you know, and I understand too, because a lot of times it's these doctors pushing this, you know, because they're like, well, they're not ready. Well, you know, I wasn't ready for puberty either. It's like some things naturally, you know, if we want to talk about natural law and natural rights, will naturally friggin' flow. I is what I is, and I ain't what I ain't. Well said, Stone. And
I'll put that up there for you. Yeah.
Yeah. I completely agree with that. You know, and surgery has long been a priority of like doctors and people who keep conflating the idea that, you know, to be a woman is to be a cis woman, to be a man is to be a cis man. You know, these things are sterilizing. They don't really produce the same drop in, or anything approaching the same drop in depression. And there's a higher rate of dissatisfaction. Like, to me, it doesn't surprise me that almost every single person who has a transition regret narrative has had surgery pushed on them. Like, that stuff is absolute bullshit, and it's more expensive. And like, when you want to talk about sterilizing procedures being pushed on people who are being denied therapeutics, does that sound like anything like we're going through right now with respect to the fact that, like, we want to give people this vax-identified jab instead of megadose vitamin D, which has been shown in large studies in Spain to be just as effective, if not more effective, at reducing hospitalizations. Or
zinc, for that matter, too.
Yeah. It's like there's already. Sorry, which?
Zinc is effective.
Zinc. Yeah.
You know, my psychologist was telling me the pros and cons of zinc. Your energy goes up. Your perception is different. She actually asked me when I was taking my first sessions with her, is like, would you like medicinal marijuana? And, you know, there's the options there. And I said, what are those my options? Because I know people that can find me marijuana, you know, that will cost less than the government dime.
Yes.
A nice glass of wine, some Rush 2112, and a nice joint. Fuck, that's heaven. That's excellent. But I don't want to do that all the time. She says, well, I can recommend zinc shots. Zinc will help you with your immune system, especially, you know, colder months out here about it. We know we get those smacks of cold, the record lows like we did this year. And zinc helps you fight off the colds or fight off sniffles, and vitamin D too. So I basically started taking my own vitamin D and my own zinc lozenges. And, you know, my days are pretty good. And it's not a terrible thing to do. It's just the last time I was actually sick, like in bed sick, it might have been about 10 years ago, where I had like a nasty little throat infection. And 2 days I was out like a light. And then I had, you know, some bowel problems and all this stuff. But after that, I was gone. And I haven't had a flu shot ever since then either, too. So what's that tell you? You know, I smoke a pack a day. I smoke a pack a day. Like, this is my downfall.
I'm surprised you don't smoke a pack of podcasts at the rate I've seen you go sometimes. Or is it just that you light it, you take one drag?
There have been a couple episodes where I'm so pissed. I'm just like, oh, good.
I hear you. Supplements too. Like, the degree to which we want to push really expensive treatments instead of supplementation, which you'd think if we were in the health business instead of the healthcare business, instead of the $22 billion here's a make work jobs program for a whole bunch of people with pieces of paper business, we'd be like, I don't even understand why supplements aren't covered by AHS at this point. Though I do take actually, I started taking iodine because I had heard that cold fingers and toes were a symptom of iodine deficiency, and I'm finding they don't get cold anymore, and that's a penny a day supplement. Just a little drop of trophic iodine. There's been so much. I don't even think it's intentional a lot of times. I think it's just people who respond to incentives, and so, you know, that's why we've been dangling our feet when it comes to Pharmacare for 60 years, going on 65, is How do you make more money if you're a nurse? Do you make more money if we pay for the heart medicine, or do we make more money if we deal with the heart surgery and the quadruple bypass and the emergency room? Do we make more money if do we make more money if people can, even without going through a doctor? And this is why I keep banging on about hormone replacement access for adults. If they can just go and get something behind the counter without all of these dispensary fees, so now you've cut the price in half. Or do we make a lot more money if we take someone who's like good and suicidal and are like, hey, you know what we really need to do is we need to cut your dick off? I'm like, not so much. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure there's some people for whom that works for, and they should have the right to do that. But like when Daniel Smith came out against genital reconstruction funding in 2012, I had a column in HuffPo. Like, okay, what about hormone replacement? You're such a libertarian. What about hormone replacement? Like, there's all these barriers to it. And I didn't get a response back, but I managed to get on her show 3 times talking about the issue because, some people respect when you go after them. Some people get super fragile and sniffy, but enough about the Notley-crats.
Well, to me, that's just a matter of their character. If they can't take substantial criticism, then as far as I'm concerned, they have no right being in any kind of parliamentary or leadership role. As a former sergeant in the military, if I couldn't take criticism or scrutiny from my subordinates, I really had no right carrying that rank. Because how can I teach my soldiers to be good men and women when I can't take the criticism too? If I screw up, then tell me, correct me, show me how to do it properly. When these politicians screw up, there's always a fantastic excuse, i.e. like the Freedom Parade. Instead of actually looking at why are people out in the street protesting, why are people mad, why are people pissed off, here is Her Majesty's provincial opposition stating that, it's a racist thing, because I guess there's a handful of women that were apprehended and attacked by a few individuals. It's wrong. I agree. I don't care what faith you are. You don't deserve to be attacked for it. Okay. It doesn't matter if you're Muslim, Christian, Jewish, Buddhist, or if you worship lemons. I could care less. But when you have a mass of people at the provincial legislature stating, we've had enough of your garbage, and then turn around and turn it into some kind of racial thing, to me, that's just disingenuous. So I will name it.
I've heard from journalist sources, and I've even heard from a source in the Alberta Sheriff's Department that's like, no, there were no assaults on sheriffs. It was a spicy and almost entirely peaceful protest, except for one exceptionally frightened Pole who wandered into a police line because he thought, the Antifa was coming to hurt them instead of like produce a little media event where City could completely misrepresent us. But I love the argument that's like, yeah, no, you're right. This hate group that opened with a trans speaker and ended with a deaf Indigenous man signing about the damage done to his people by the Indian Act, which, you're in favor of repealing. I think it's slightly more nuanced than that, but not much more. And I think, when we talk about, pro-Pierre, anti-Justin, the worst thing about Pierre Trudeau was when he didn't have the courage of his convictions and he wasn't willing to carry on an argument. That was always when he was at his crappiest. When you're just like, oh, fine. That was like, that's not why we elected you, dude. Anyway.
Well, it's a parliamentary system. We have to have the proper bantering back and forth. Like I said in my last episode, I want to see more people stand up, and I want to see them point, and I want to see them, hey, no, you're wrong. You passed this bill. This is what's going to happen. Here are the repercussions, i.e. C21, C22. It's bad to own a gun, but if you're caught with a gun, we're going to be a little more lenient with you. Well, you just made me a criminal overnight because I'm a gun owner, yet you apprehend some thug who actually acquired something illegal that might have paid anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000, $3,000 worth on the street. He commits a heinous crime with it and drive-by shooting, but then you slap him on the wrist. Well, which is that then?
Right? Black Pigeon Speaks calls this a narco-tyranny, where we're increasingly criminalizing those who are well within their rights, and we're loosening the we're letting slip the dogs of war so as to create the context for all of these tougher laws in the first place. We're letting bad actors get away with more and good actors get away with less. And it's really not focused on the problem. You got a point there. I think the big problem, though, when we're like, oh, we need an opposition that's willing to stand up. It's like we need members of parliament to stop being voting machines. And when they complain that the leader won't let us, dude, it's you. It's all the backbenchers. If they don't stand up, if they're like, well, I don't want to hurt my party, you're hurting your party. You're making them a one-person vehicle. You're making the quality of our democracy worse. This is always where I differed with Robert Turner, who knew what the NDP were doing to hormone replacement access, spending like the construction costs of the school, making it harder for trans people to buy, and by the way, spending $20 million a year, keeping it behind a prescription while they had an over-the-counter abortion pill at government expense. Like, why is it harder to buy estrogen than get a government-funded abortion? Anyway, his refusal to speak up is hurting his party long term. And no, I have no time for the Notley-crats right now. I was willing to get into politics just to push this issue forward. Now I'm there because Rachel Notley cannot become premier again. I'm going to do everything within my power to ensure that backslapping pack of hacks has nothing to do with the powers of ministers of the crown again. They are not to be trusted, and they throw all the good people who support them under the bus and engage in government by dangling of keys. It's absolutely disgusting. Like, as I said, you got a climate change leadership plan that, if you follow the established science, and again, Stone has a really good critique, and we should have these debates, but the climate change leadership plan accelerates climate change. That's not,
Well, you're burning more. That's the thing. Yeah. You're burning more garbage. You're burning more wood to generate electricity.
Yeah.
And like I mentioned before, where's the incentives to create better electricity? Hemp, for example. T-Stone made a comment there. Cannabis and hemp could solve a lot of problems as ails the world. You can still grow hemp without the THC benefits.
Yeah.
Okay. But still make proper clothing, material, food, fuel. Out of what? How many acres? If you had a couple of acres to grow hemp in, and if the government had any proper incentive in helping the climate change, they would say, okay, we're going to buy half of this, and we're going to help you pay for this and bring it to market because we want you to thrive. And all we'll ask in return is maybe 15% in a tax. Great. There's an idea. That way you get paid. Customers get something they want. You're pushing something forward to the environment. Plus, you're putting food in your table too. You know what I mean? And you're saving up. You're having a savings account without creating more of these carbon taxes because the Kyoto Accord said this and the Paris Climate Accord said this. Well, my apologies to that. Fuck the Paris Climate Accords. Okay, we know in Canada, we don't take truckloads of garbage and throw them in the ditch. Okay, we don't do that. We don't throw our shit in the rivers. There are people that pollute, yes, okay, but they're not as bad as, let's say, communist China and certain parts of India and certain parts of the industrial sides of the United States of America.
And you're right. Like 90% of the world's plastic in the oceans comes from 10 rivers, and they're almost entirely in South and Southeast Asia. You're so correct that we don't really need a whole bunch of new taxes. We don't need a whole bunch of new spending programs that are picking and choosing winners and losers based on like how nice a press conference it makes.
Government tenders, exactly. Yeah.
We have a barrier to entry problem. We have we don't let good options actually compete problem, and that's the real problems that we have. We have people like all of these regulations that are like, oh, it's in the interest of what if we didn't have this regulation and somebody gets hurt? Well, there's a myopia there in that the ability to consume, the ability to produce, these things are goods themselves. And just because we don't measure the economic capacity lost by regulating potential competition out of existence doesn't mean it's there. It's like you literally can't like go and sell like something that you've baked in your kitchen on the street. It's got to be made in a commercial kitchen. So like how much does that raise the price of food? And how much does that prevent people from getting into competition? It's all of this stuff where it's more about, we have an economy that's more about rewarding people for their ability to jump through hoops than it is for rewarding their ability to make goods and services.
Well, actual innovation. Where's the innovations? I know there's still an environmental standard here. Let's say if you're building a sports arena or a sports tent, now the Alberta government will chip in half because it's made from recycled rubber, the sports floor. That's to me, that's a great incentive, because there's a lot of old tires out there that can't be used for the highways and trucks and whatever anymore. So what great incentive to recycle it to something useful. I was always told the idea of recycling old pot cans, make ashtrays, make little trinkets, my wife has a thing for owls. She loves owls. So she'll buy little things made out of recycle, little things like that, little innovations.
I like the innovations. I don't know if I like that particular subsidy. I'm kind of with Margaret Thatcher on subsidies for sports stadiums. I think you get less sports stadiums that way, and you get more expensive and less accessible ones.
Well, it's a community. I'm not talking, let's say, for a national team. I mean, let's say where I am in Wainwright, a sports arena for the kids, because it's helping the community out. Not because it's going to help your favorite soccer team or an NHL player that's making six figures or more a year. Now, this is for the kid that wants to be the next Diego Maradona or the next Wayne Gretzky. Something that's going to help the community out, so the community can go there and say rent the floor and play a game of box lacrosse or play a game of indoor footy or play floor hockey. Especially in the summer months too, where it does rain. You can't really, like I played soccer in the rain, and it's no biggie. It sucks though, right? But the little things like that to help the community, because it's one thing taking taxes to make sure, like the old adage, roads. It's another thing taking taxes when it comes to actually defending people's liberties. That's through the judicial system, that's through the social system, and that's through an international in case there's an invasion. And we are not evolved yet as a species, right, to just dismiss an invasion or dismiss chaos. We have not evolved yet as a species. Now, Canada, we don't need to go to war at the drop of a hat. We've never really had to do that. History has proven otherwise. Yes, there were times we had to step up and fight when it was necessary. And there were times where we had to step in and say, hey, bully, fuck off. But we're losing our ability to do that because of a lot of these regulations. And as Zyklon says, socialism is great to other people's money. That's the thing. Look at the way our procurement boards roll in this country. They don't give two shits about the long run. They gave a crap of what's tendered and what's good and what's now. They don't think about the longevity of, for example, of our Coast Guard ships or of our Navy ships, right? If the city of Toronto procured fire trucks like the federal government procures military equipment, there'd be a lot of angry firefighters out there, I tell you. So,
well, and they may well do. Though I'm sure we have a lot of happy bus drivers in Edmonton while we, avoid automating that service when we could be reducing the price of public transit, because part of the problem too with the way that we run government and large industry now is it's a credential class welfare program that identifies as public service. You're right when they're thinking about the longevity of military infrastructure. I think that's part of the problem with a lot of roadway procurement. We don't think about how long it lasts, because there's benefits to spending the money now, and the crumbling road is going to be the next guy's problem. Stone had a good comment. It's always in the name of protecting you. That's a tricky little way of taking away your rights. And I definitely agree with that we're getting into a trap of trading civil liberties for temporary security, and
that's the thing. That's the dilemma they're promoting. Look at all the politicians that got their PP slapped over Christmas for traveling, and it didn't matter what side they were on. Didn't matter if they're orange, blue, or red, or green. Right? Telling us all this BS about staying in and don't get together. It's like, well, why are you traveling then? Because you're making the big bucks? Because you know people? It's essential because you say so? I would love to take my wife to Italy. I would love to take her to Italy. I would love to tour Tuscany and give her that trip of a lifetime in wine country.
My best friend. Yeah, exactly. My best friend's fiance is in Virginia. She'd like to visit her, and when I think it was Kathleen Ganley said that it's just a bunch of snowbirds complaining that they have to pay $2,000 for a hotel stay, and it's like, no, there's poor people who would like to be able to travel. Thank you. But she's one of those people who lives in this bubble of the middle class. I remember watching a question period during the Notley government. I think it was Christina Gray. She was the Democratic deficit minister, or whatever they call it at that point. Getting asked a question, and they said, "Well, we've rearranged this system so that now your bank balance doesn't matter with respect to supporting a politician because the donation limit is like a little over $4,000." How many people have $4,000 in the bank? That was the follow-up question I'd hoped Robin Luff was going to ask, but she didn't, unfortunately. Dave's right. There's some industrial strategy that we're missing, and again, it's barriers to entry, and it's people who profit from a lack of competition, keeping their opponents out of the game.
Well, it's like how the CBC rolls and operates.
Mm-hmm.
How much money they make from the federal government, the taxpayers' kitty every year, and look at the subpar programming they put on.
Oh God, yeah.
You get heart.
It's so embarrassing. I used to be a defender of the CBC, and it's just like you can't now. They are such hackish propagandists. I remember coming to them with the HRT issue, and it's like, you have anything you want to say to the camera? It's like, yeah, the Notley government is deliberately entrenching barriers to trans hormone replacement in violation of the Canada Health Act and Alberta Human Rights Act. What did they do in their story? Oh, we're trying to help doctors understand they can prescribe this medicine that they've been prescribing to postmenopausal cis women for decades. Like, give me a break. They're paid propagandists with an axe to grind. When I ran for the Freedom Conservative leadership, I ran on civil society bucks. I wanted $100 to go to every Albertan they could assign to any political group, NGO, media organization that they saw fit, instead of the government picking and choosing, oh, you're an approved journalist, we'll let you get a subsidy. You're an approved artist, we'll let you get a subsidy. It's like, no, let's put that in people's hands. Frankly, we should just opt out of CBC funding if we could. I'm sure they'll say that's not constitutional, but when the hell has the Constitution ever really fucking mattered to this government?
Well, obviously it hasn't. It hasn't, and I don't think Pierre Trudeau actually kept that in mind when he was putting it together too.
Oh, right? he made a misstep. Actually, between him and Lougheed, I think they made a misstep. Because first he had the reasonable limits clause, which was supposed to be strict scrutiny, the standard that they have in the United States, where you can violate the Constitution if there's an exigent need and you are doing it the absolutely minimally intrusive way possible, and you're not going after a suspect class. That's the strict scrutiny standard, and that's what I think Pierre had intended. But then what happened was, during the negotiations, Lougheed says, well, we got to base this on British parliaments, and British parliaments, you can override those fundamental civil liberties if the parliament says so. And with the notwithstanding clause, which is what's used to buttress Bill 178, the Bill of Rights. Oh yeah, Diefenbaker's Bill of Rights, which unfortunately anything else can supersede the Bill of Rights if we say so. But Bill 178 is passed constantly with the notwithstanding clause attached, because that was what Lougheed was envisioning. It was when he was talking about a provincial opt-out. And I think between the two of them, courts have taken that it's legislative guidance that governments just have carte blanche to override the Constitution. And I don't think that's what Lougheed intended. I don't think that's what Pierre intended. I don't think that's what any of them had in mind. And we've gotten into a morass. When I ran, I said we should rewrite the reasonable limits clause to an exceptional limits clause, because we have done some hanky shit with Section 2 of the Constitution Act.
Well, even now, it's been a shit show. And I can understand the notwithstanding clause in any jurisdiction when it comes to, let's say, if you're being invaded, or there's a catastrophe like in the movie 2012. That's when I can understand a notwithstanding clause.
Well, you're not going to have a legislature meet for that amount of time. But yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's like, okay, say a nuke goes off in central Canada. I can understand a notwithstanding clause out of that, because no matter how you look at it, people en masse are going to die. It doesn't matter if it's from the fallout or the actual epicenter of the explosion itself, people are going to die. So you do what you can to keep people alive and keep them sane, especially the nukes they have now. Or let's say we're at World War III and either Red China or some ex-Soviet dissidents have conglomerated a 1,000,000-man army to hit our western shores, then I can understand a notwithstanding clause. But because of this pandemic, because of feelings and projections and models, Nah. Get the
Yeah.
economy going, get people working, fine. Maintain a social distancing thing or a mask mandate, fine. But I'm getting sick and tired of bylaw officers and police officers handing out tickets like candies, especially
Mhm.
when it comes to people who want to go to church or go to mosque or go to synagogues. I'm not
Mhm.
religious myself,
Me either.
but those are one of the fundamental principles that I
Yeah.
fought for as a soldier. You let people pray any way they goddamn fucking want to.
Yeah,
I don't
exactly.
care. I don't care what faith you are. I don't care if you're Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist. You dance with monkeys. You worship lemons. I don't care. You have every right to do that. You have every right to speak your mind. I believe in due process. That's the way our justice is supposed to work.
Mhm.
However, the aficionados and know-it-alls. Now, I'd have to say Alberta is more laid back than what parts of BC and Ontario and Quebec has been. But in the same sense, who are these clowns who are elected to protect us when you're not protecting us?
Yeah,
You're
they're
not.
they're not.
They're not protecting.
Yeah, you've got you have some good points there. And I generally tend to agree. Except I do think at this point the science isn't even behind the mask mandates and the social distancing. I said on Adam's podcast. How many periodontitis attributable heart attacks are you willing to trade for 100 fewer cases of COVID? Like we talk about, we're not stressing the healthcare system. We're stressing the friggin' healthcare system with what we're doing. We've got untreated cancers coming up, and when you want to talk about like intervening to like stop harm around the world, these lockdowns, not just in Canada but around the developing world, have produced economic effects that have led to 15 million excess starvation deaths in the developing world. That's 10 times the death toll.
And how many
Of
suicides? How many
Yep.
suicides too? How many people
Suicides
have hit
and
the sauce again? How many domestic disputes? And it's not just the
yeah.
man beating up his wife.
Oh
There's a lot of
no.
wives getting into trouble too. So,
Yeah. Yeah. They
it's
just
not
don't get
just
in trouble as easy because we got a really messed up system there. But yeah, you're right. 55% of intimate partner homicide victims are female assigned, 45% are male assigned. And frankly, if we were, it's like Lincoln said, the best thing to do with any law is any bad laws to enforce it well. Because if we were enforcing our hate speech laws well, Nola Loretto would be in prison for the bullshit that she said about oh, there's a bus crash in Humboldt. Did you realize the same amount of women were murdered by their partners over this time? And I'm like, well, how many male assigned people were murdered? And she just could not.
I
The part
remember
of her
that.
brain that recognizes someone with a penis can be murdered by someone with a vagina just will not turn on because she's a hateful fucking cunt. Sorry, you said we could use the word.
Yes, use it well.
Yeah.
Yes, well done.
Fuck this feminist Sheila Gunn Reid. I have no fucking time for Nola Loretto, and I've told her as much. And you should get on her Twitter and include this little clip. Because I tried to tell her this at Parkland, and she wouldn't fucking listen. It was great. She's giving a speech, and she's like, she starts off with like, "Fuck you, Rebel Media. Fuck you, whatever spy from Rebel Media is here. What? Fuck you, Rebel Media. You're on camera. You're on camera. It's literally your talk is literally already being recorded. Rebel doesn't need to spy on you. The rest of us just need to listen to you and the absolute nonsensical shit that comes out of your hate-filled, myopic mouth." So again, this is why we need free speech, because we need to be able to counteract it. And I want the bigots out in the open. It's good because then we can point out how their ideology connects to another less popular or more popular ideology and how they're drawing from the same roots. Sorry, I got on a little bit of a rant there.
No, that's fine. That's why I put the Thursday Fastball up here to get things going. And I'll just say to my audience again, too, if you like what you hear and see, please click the bell and subscribe and share this all around. You can also see my episodes in the Crusty Canuck podcast on Podbean and YouTube. You can also find me on Facebook, Twitter, Gab, Telegram, and Signal. By all means, my guest tonight is Ms. Valerie Keefe, a well-educated aficionado, Edmontonian, political activist, and a down-around decent fucking human being who likes to use the word cunt. I love that. Well done, madam. Yes.
Thank you.
Don't
forget to smash the like, guys, because that helps the algorithm.
Smash like and all that stuff too. Get the algorithm going. Let's get some more free speech out here. And that writer that wrote that column about the Humboldt crash, I be honest with you, every time I see that kind of garbage, I don't read the whole thing. I try to, honestly, Valerie, I do try to read it. But when you're sitting there talking about the strife of women in this country and trying to be this professional victim, It's like,
Yeah.
if it was 1958 and that happened, I could see that article making some kind of sense.
Mm-hmm.
It was 1958. But
Yeah.
in 2018 or 2017, no,
Yeah. Well, yeah.
it's baseless. It's dumbfounded. It has nothing to back up the claim. Well, okay, 16 people were killed in a heinous bus crash because of the fault of a different driver, someone who received a license who didn't follow the rules, who met the provincial and the federal standards when it came to hauling freight. Okay. Now that pissed me off because in the military, I was not allowed to drive until I was qualified to do things properly. Right. And I have some bus training too. They wouldn't let me in the road until I got the tick in the box properly. So it's like, okay, now when an individual,
I think he was too. That's part of the
well,
problem is
he was qualified, but he wasn't qualified. He didn't have the hours to back him up. He was just basically getting his license because he was a family member, I think, family member or a friend of the family. Needless to say, there were people turning it into a racial thing and turning it into an immigrant thing. And it's like, no,
it's a nepotism thing.
Well, someone didn't follow the rules. That's the thing.
Yeah.
And it ended up killing 16 people.
Yeah.
It ended up ruining some lives. So when I hear these feminazis talking about, misogyny and all this, well, they're forgetting the word misandry too.
Yeah.
They're forgetting that.
Yeah, I have a different view to some extent. I think some of it's structural transmisogyny. Like you give some people permission to be women, and some people you punish for their failure to be men. But yeah, no, legacy feminists are privileged twats out to privileged twats, and I have no friggin' time for that bullshit. Like
I love that.
Like,
yes, privileged twats.
Yeah, privileged twats out to privileged twats.
One issue at a time. That was priceless.
Thank you. Some people will call that a slur, and I call those people absolute children.
Morons?
Moron.
That works too.
Overweening narcissists. We could go on and on, but look, there's only one group that, according to people like Nola Loretto and the rest of the "Don't Think Very Very Hard When Something Benefits Me" club, who they think are privileged, who are more homeless, more jailed, more assaulted, more abused, more forced out of school, get less funding for every cancer death that they go through, more incarcerated, more raped when you actually inventory rape instead of go by self-identity, because guess what? Like just with this shirt, some people have an easier time identifying as victims than others, and that normally is what we would call privilege. Like I keep telling the left, and this is what I said at the beginning, like if the fake left would stop being fake, if they would actually think systemically, they'd win elections in landslides. But instead they gotta personalize everything and be like painfully neoliberal, and not recognize that it's like, hey, guess what? When you say let's elevate narratives, the narratives that are listened to are narratives that are more easy to listen to. Like Emmett Till got Me Too'd. The Central Park Five got Me Too'd. Suspending the presumption of innocence doesn't help oppressed people. It helps people that we're already willing to listen to. Here's one of my favorite stats about that nobody knows. From Reconstruction on in the South in the United States, 73% of lynching victims were black. 97% of lynching victims had a penis. There's some people who we have a narrative of their privilege that we kind of ignore. And call it misandry, call it structural transmisogyny, call it the 2 legs good, 3 legs bad gender ideology of the fake left. Call it whatever you want. Like maybe we should care the same about domestic violence victims, regardless of their genitalia or their assigned sex. They're
being hurt as well, and it's not necessarily by the hands of an angry father, right? I personally, I do what you want with your body. I don't care if you want an abortion or not. I don't agree with it. Honestly, I don't agree with abortion, but I'm not going to tell a woman you can't have an abortion. That's like you telling me I can't have a cigarette. Well, fuck, whatever. Okay. You know what I mean? Oxymoron. So I'm not going to say that. I don't agree with it, but you knock yourself out. But no one actually takes into consideration too that when there's kids in the household, okay, and I'm talking from personal experience, dealing with an ornery stepfather, there are a lot of excuses made up when children get hurt. And especially younger kids too. Kids under 10 I have a soft spot for that. When I know about a
yeah.
child that's under 10 years old, and it doesn't matter if they're male or female, and they've been physically, verbally, and sexually abused, my
Mhm.
logic is this: kill the guardians and appoint somebody who really
Yeah.
gives a shit. Regardless of what problems people have now, I do suffer from PTSD, but that
Yeah.
doesn't give me merit to hit my wife.
No.
I suffer from anxiety issues, whatever. It's a lot tamer now because I've had help. I've taken some medication. Like I say, I
Mhm.
smoke a bit of weed. That has
Mhm.
never prompted me to hit my wife. I have
No.
done violent things in my life. I have been in fights. I've been in fist
Yeah.
fights. I've had to fight strangers in a bar. There's times I've had my bell rung. There's times
Mhm.
I've rung bells too. But that has never ever given me the right or the privilege or the action to
No.
hold my fist like this and punch my wife in the face, or to hit a
No.
child for that matter. It's one thing
No.
giving a kid a cuff upside the head for being lippy. I get that. It happened to me. I'm sure it happened to you and your kid. Hey, stop that. Oh,
I got a
okay,
bit more than that. Yeah.
But if you grab a 10-year-old boy and you shake him and you scold him and call him every name in the book, you're fucking with kids. I hate
Mm-hmm.
that. I hate
Yeah.
that. I don't care if you're a man. I don't care if you're a woman. If I catch you doing that,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that's one thing,
I,
you know?
I, I mean, yeah, I get where you're coming from, and definitely we need a little bit more guardianship. I'm not at the point where I'm in favor of the death penalty for child abusers, even though I went through a lot of that shit, and that's an element of my PTSD. Like, I'd get bullied, and then I'd come home and get abused for being bullied. That was fucking fun. But that said, we don't recognize how generally reciprocal abuse is. We have this myth that it's like, it's right up there with teach men not to rape. And again, I hate to tell you, most rape victims male assigned, and in fact, a minimum of 40% of non-institutional rapists are female assigned. But there are less than 1% of people in prison for sexual assault. There's actually some data that suggests that they're the majority of like sexual abusers of children, and we don't hold them to account because we've got this belief that some people are just they could do nothing wrong. They're so delicate and weak, and we shouldn't make them go to jail when they do bad things, or
Mm-hmm.
make them play 5 sets of tennis, to get the same amount of money, even though
Well,
they've
I've
got
had
fewer
female
viewers.
teachers that have done some shitty things to myself and to some of the kids I
Oh
went
yeah,
to school with.
yeah,
There was nothing sexual,
no,
thankfully, but
yeah,
it was abuse nonetheless.
mm-hmm.
And I've seen the double standards, and I've seen some of the excuses and heard
Yeah,
some of the excuses that some female teachers have given to principals and investigators alike. And of course, they get off scot free. Oh, they're trying their best to do this. It's the same thing as the battered wife syndrome, right? Oh,
mm-hmm.
he's just angry, just having a bad day. Well, if we keep making excuses up for that violence, we
Mm-hmm.
make excuses up for that disgusting display of power, which it is
Mm-hmm.
because you look at a teacher and educator as an authority figure. You're taught that. Now
Yeah,
little Johnny, you make sure you listen to Mrs. So and so or Miss this, Miss that. Okay, right? And then you screw up a
yeah,
math lesson or screw up something, and she's throwing chalk at you, or she throws a
yeah,
chalk brush at you, or she picks
yeah,
you up and she spanks you in front of people, or cuffs you
mm-hmm.
upside the head harder than your parents ever would.
Mm-hmm.
Then you get a little bit skeptical. And then
Yeah,
when you hit about 13 or 14, and some of these female teachers are saying, oh, well, boys read boys. You guys are disgusting. Well,
yeah,
if I was a teacher and I was saying that to little girls, what would happen to me?
yeah. Yeah, I know, and we got a major Taylorism problem in our schools too. This is the
Mm-hmm.
problem: is that we're trying to make all of the students learn the same thing at the same rate, and it does two things: it slows down the degree to which everyone learns,
Mm-hmm.
and drives the smartest kids in the class crazy, and also produces a lot of this bullying because you got kids struggling to keep up who get taught more than they can retain at a given time, so they're not taught to mastery, so they have increasing gaps in their knowledge. So congratulations, we spent $16,000 a year. That's what we're spending right now on a public school student, making them an utterly dysfunctional, innumerate and partially illiterate adult who has the only bit of joy they have is like humiliating the smart kid who can keep up. and perhaps that smart kid is also like absolutely aggravated at how slow things are going. I remember during the Klein era, I'm sitting in an all male assigned math class because that was one of these wonderful little educational innovations. It's like, oh yeah, that's why girls can't learn math. No, I don't think that's it. But anyway, you've got 35 kids. We're learning algebra, which I know back and forth, and my teacher has got the problems up on the board, and I'm just sitting there at the front of the class doing the problems because you've got 34 other kids to teach who don't know this yet or are struggling with this. Just let me get this done so that I can do other things with my life after school. And at like 3 minutes to the bell, he's like, "Are you doing the problems?" And he erases the problems and puts up a different set of problems, which I then finish in like 5 minutes because like one factor algebra, like it was not a difficult thing for me. But like how petty and how small and how desperately in love with your own sense of self-importance. And that's what I hate about this system is that what we have is not people passionate about education. There are great teachers.
Oh yes,
and
of course.
They are held hostage by a system that keeps blithering mediocrities like that in business. That taught me like we need major overhaul and we need some politicians with the guts to go after the ATA and all these other teachers unions and their desperate desire to like both protect their members from any serious accountability and teach kids what to think instead of how to think. I honestly think we should be we should be running schools a little bit more like we run gyms, and teachers should be a little bit more like intellectual personal trainers. And if you want to lecture for a group of kids, you got Zoom now. You can teach a topic to 60 kids at a time if they all sign up for it.
Yeah.
Hey, Tom.
Now I'm not saying being a teacher is easy. I remember teaching classes in the military when I had like say 8 recruits or eight candidates, right? And that would have its toll, but when you practice and do repetition with certain things, you would find it comes easier. Okay. My problem in school when I was a student, I didn't like math. I didn't have an aptitude for it, but I had more of an aptitude for things that were pragmatic and practical, i.e. what we had was called life math. You were taught how to differentiate from interest rates to inflation rates. You were taught how to figure out your mortgage payments based on your salary. You were taught how to figure out how 20% off this works. Basically life skills.
Make it real, yeah.
Realistic mathematics. Okay. Now I'm not disenfranchising any mathematician out there that wants to put a rocket into space or send another probe to Mars or build the best fucking bridge on the planet. By all means, hey, there's people out there who have a gift for that. Outstanding. But
most people got to make their bills balance, so yeah.
Well, that's the thing. How do you figure out? How do you balance a checkbook? I got to teach myself to do that again. How do I sit and write cursive again? Because you and I are both on the keyboard typing. Oh shit, grammatical error. Oh, okay, fine. That's little things that we can work on. But we were taught the basics in education. We were taught how to read, how to dissect a paragraph and find the pinpoints of it. We were taught how to write an essay. We were taught how to spell accordingly. We understand the Queen's English. We also understand North American English too. That's always a contrast because when I spell the word color, it's O-U-R, like we were taught in school, not O-R, like they're taught in the States. Neighbor, the same thing, But
it's interesting. I write a series that's set in the United States, so I end up flipping between Canadian and American English sometimes. But you're right. You gotta find all sorts of different ways to reach kids. I, for example, had a massive aptitude in math. I was always top of my class, and I learned more from watching the PBS program Square One, with MathNet, and I love that, than I ever did from any math teacher I ever had. I would get my problems done and I would sit and I would read and then I would get scolded for reading. And I'm like,
well, I have
other kids to teach.
I have a story about that too. I took summer school because I had to get my grade 10 equivalency. So I had to maintain a 60% average to pass the course to get my grade 10. And then, okay, I'm good to go. And I had more fun sitting in that classroom for 2 weeks, understanding mathematics than I ever did throughout my, academic career, to say the least. And the thing being is this guy made it fun. He tried to help me understand with key parts of life, how this formula would work. Okay. Now, when it comes to tech math, if I'm getting into naval acoustics or anything to do with aerospace and aeronautical, okay, I can understand the relevance of certain tech mass. But if I'm going to go, let's say, to college and get into art or get into acting or writing or being creative, you would think that English would be the superior element to get into, or dramatic arts, rather than you have to get your grade 12 tech or you go nowhere in life. When you tell kids that crap, they are not going to persevere, because you cannot force someone to like something, right? I can appreciate Shakespeare, but I'll never go out and buy a play. I can appreciate that. I'll never go and buy anything from George Bernard Shaw. I can appreciate it though. I like music,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna go and buy country music because I'm not a big fan of country music, but I can appreciate guys like Johnny Cash and Chris Christopherson because they're great storytellers. That is being, get a repertoire and understand the pros and cons of making a record in Nashville. It's a matter of the individual wanting to embrace something. I've had people say, "Oh, you should have done this and should have done that." It's like, well, I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to study mathematics because that just wasn't in my spectrum. What I felt I wanted to do, that was never in my menu. Right.
It's interesting because now I am in screenwriting, and I didn't really have a passion for writing, but political science and economics actually turned out to be pretty good for my talent stack, because when you're writing budget West Wing, like Aaron Sorkin had a writer's room of political heavyweights. He had people who worked in the Carter and Clinton administrations, and so I've got the political education, and I can kind of steal a few good phrases from him. That's where I'm at. But one of the best, you talk about English, one of the best English teachers I ever had, he couldn't teach today. He had a Bachelor of Commerce, and they want you to have an education after degree now. They want you to have 5 years. And it's like, no, he was a Blackadder fan, and he broke down Shakespeare in a really interesting and compelling way, including some of the dirty jokes, including using some of the words that we've used tonight. And he's principal of the school, and I guarantee now, and he could not, if he had the credentials that he became a teacher with today, get hired. And that's part of the problem. We have dummies with piece of paper problem. We have, and I said this, and I'll never stop saying it. In the United States, 70% of the increase in income from a 4-year post-secondary degree goes to the last credit, the absolute last course you finish. So 2.5% of the learning, 70% of the increase in income. In Canada, those with some post-secondary earn less than those with no post-secondary. So it's about 110%. Canada has 2/3 the productivity of the United States. Here's another couple Western countries, France and Japan. Now, who do you think has higher GDP per hour worked? Who do you think is more productive, the French or the Japanese?
Oh, I'd say Japan.
You're wrong.
Really?
Yeah. If France has American productivity, they make about $60 per hour worked, and Japan has Canadian productivity. And you know why? Well, if you've ever been an anime fan, you know their entire life is about that college entrance exam at the end of high school. You got kids killing themselves trying to get that test passed because it's their whole economic life. Well, congratulations now, because you don't really have to think and develop and grow in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s. It's all about slotting people in who did well on a test at a particular moment in time, and not about the intellectual and emotional growth of people. And that's the structural reform that Abe he's failed to recognize that they need. And that's why Japan has been an economic basket case for 2 decades, because they got a credentialism problem. And it's amazing because, you would expect the Japanese, they care more about science and technology. These are people
it's a work ethic they've had too.
Yes, and they have an insane work ethic.
Yeah, great.
But it turns out sometimes it's not about how hard you work. It's about how smart you work and how much you're willing to compete. And especially as we move into more of a winner-take-all economy, they've done some simulations, and they think that people who are famous in their field right now would have about a 1 in 12 chance of being famous in if you ran it over again in an alternate universe. So I'm like, by all means, hard work is the best way to get there. But we got to recognize sometimes people's hard work connects with a hard 8.
Oh, exactly. I would agree too. Like you could pull, let's say 45, 60 hours a week of good solid labor, good solid leadership,
Hmm.
good logistics, right?
Hmm.
And it all depends who you're working for too, to
Yeah.
recognize that strength that you have.
Turned
For
around
being
a
in the
star.
military,
Yeah. Mm.
the military is an excellent example of that, right? There are lots of people I have worked with and worked for who have gone above and beyond the standard for their
Mhm.
section commanders and for their platoon warrant officers and their company sergeant majors. And just because, let's say, one warrant officer and one sergeant major didn't like that guy or that gal
Yep.
because they weren't playing hockey or they
Hmm.
couldn't run as fast as this guy or carry enough
Hmm.
weight as that guy,
Yeah.
all of a sudden, all that effort that you have made to get that notoriety, get that attention that you rightfully deserve because you've worked your ass off for it,
Yeah.
is null and void. All
And
because someone
that's
didn't like
yeah.
you. And
And
like
when
you
I
say
ran for
about the
that,
piece of paper mentality,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
I've dealt with lots of people on my podcast who've said, "Oh, well, I've got a history degree and you're wrong about the Nazis." Really? I've talked to people who've actually lived in Nazi Germany that
Hmm.
witnessed it firsthand. So I don't need a fancy degree to
No,
prove that point to you when I've actually talked to a witness that was there.
there's a
Especially
lot
these
of ways. Yeah.
especially these new commie kids coming around waving their hammer and sickle like the proletariat's going to save the
Yeah.
day. And when you actually talk to someone who's lived in the former Eastern Bloc, and they
Hmm.
tell you how many times they had to get up with their parents to wait for bread, or wait for toiletries, or to wait for a
Hmm.
car, or to wait for the
Yeah.
heat to come on, to
Or
wait
how
for them to go to
crappy the
work,
air was. Yeah.
and
Hmm.
how terrible and disgusting and filthy, and how neighbors are ratting on neighbors over the
Hmm.
dumbest things. It gives you a
Yeah.
different perspective. And then when you go overseas to a country and you've seen what totalitarianism has done to people, you realize, okay, proletariat sucks, fascism sucks, communism sucks, any dictator ever
Hmm.
is going to suck. So you
Yeah.
start to formulate this in the back of your head. You're going,
That was a
okay,
good point that Friedman made, is that any society that focuses on making everyone equal will find that they're unable to do so, but any society that focuses on making people free will have a lot more equality. And I think if you don't unwind like the degree to which people want some amount of stability in their lives and some amount of like a square one to start from,
mm-hmm.
um, then the right doesn't pull their head out of their butts, and they keep the fake left in business. They keep those oligarchical collectivists in business.
Mm-hmm.
When I ran for the Freedom Conservative leadership, I ran on a freedom dividend, like a citizen's income of $1,100 a month, and we'd index it so that it became part inflation and part real growth. So that as the economy would get bigger, it'd be a smaller part of the economy, but the rising tide would lift all boats. And the reason I did that is, you're right. It's those sniffy little douchebags who are just like, I don't like this person because they don't play hockey. They're not a team player. They're not whatever you have you. And if you spread the fuck you money around, if you spread that money around, then you let real capitalism flourish. You give more sources of economic power so that it's like, I'll tell you, I've had trouble finding work, which boggles my mind. I have a year-over-year increase of 30% at a store in sales, and we go from break even to making 8% on book value, and I'm there for 40% of the hours, and I'm like trying to explain to the boss, like, here's why you want to put the clamato here compared to the wine. Um, using stuff that I did learn in college about substitutes and complements, and not being able to go anywhere from there. I'd applied for 400 jobs, and I'd get called in for an interview, and it was very clear in the interview that me showing up to the interview was so that they could ask the questions that they are not legally allowed to ask. Because I'd call afterwards, I'd be like, so I did this interview with you, what's going on? Oh, we hired someone more qualified. Oh, okay. Well, what was the qualification that they had? How could I improve? Well, they were just more qualified. Oh, I see. They were qualified by not being a fat
Yeah,
tranny.
and
Gotcha.
I got
Thank you
that
so
too.
fucking much.
Yeah, I got that too, Valerie.
Yeah.
Big time.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I've applied for a simple thing too.
Mm-hmm.
And
I don't like the cut of your jib. Yeah.
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 Well, I'll look your opinion on this. And I got let go
Mm-hmm.
from a job. I think I mentioned this on Sunday with a show there. I was
Mm-hmm.
working at the base gym, and we were talking about Pride Parade and all that stuff. And like I said, I don't care. I
Mm-hmm.
don't care if Bob and Steve hold hands and wear thongs and jump around the street.
Yeah.
Hey, knock yourselves out, guys. Whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I just got, like I mentioned earlier, like I got sick and tired of the indoctrination models that we're
Yeah.
constantly seeing. And I basically said, leave kids alone. Let them grow into it. Like I say, if Billy hits puberty and he looks over to his friend Bobby and he likes Bobby, well, okay, guess what? There you go. Hey, all the power to it.
Yeah,
You know,
and Pride parades is presently constituted are bullshit. I've been assaulted at Pride for
well,
protesting the twatly government,
I'm a
like is
veteran. How
spending
come we only
money
have one
making it
day?
harder. Yeah.
How come we only have one day to celebrate our fallen when,
Mm-hmm.
Pride has to be a whole month? It's like, okay, well,
Yeah.
whatever. Like, who cares? Like, I don't care. My lifestyle is not going to change because there's a
Mm-hmm.
Pride parade going on or there's this parade going on. But when you
Yeah.
turn everything political and you're trying to mold people into something, then that's no
Mm-hmm.
different than the anti-gay bashers or the gay
Mm-hmm.
bashers of 30 years ago. It's
Yeah.
just a different
Oh,
face.
Yep. Yeah,
You know,
it is, and it's a lot of times it's a refusal to recognize, some of these things are coerced and other things are coerced. So if we don't let people get where they're getting, and we don't give people more freedom, they're not going to get there. And it is about pushing official ideology. I know. I'm absolutely, sick of the fact that like those who are out, and by the way, it's those who are out. Like let's stop pretending that you are what you identify as when identity is coerced. All right, that means that every queer person was straight. No, but they make us memory.
I don't believe that
stuff.
either. I don't believe that either too.
Yeah,
I believe there's some people that know who they are. They have a hidden identity. Maybe I was lucky. When I hear puberty, it's like I knew I liked girls. Great.
There you go. So
hey, excellent. And I had friends of mine that I went to school with that weren't sure. And when they got a bit older, and yes, there was prejudice, and there was some really disgusting behavior for some administrators that I knew, some teachers I knew. But those days are gone now. Now this is what you have now. There is equality when it comes to who you're married to, who you sleep with. That's fantastic. But then again, that shouldn't give you a stepping stone to any special privileges either.
No.
That shouldn't make
especially because the most privileged people in the community are the ones who get out. Like the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force in 2011 did a survey of the trans community, what they could find. And they found that Black people were openly trans at 6% of their sample compared to 13% of the general population. They found their sample was 1.8 times as likely to have a post-secondary degree as the general population. So this isn't, and I understand why there was a big anti-queer backlash when Rome fell, because it's the privileged people who get to be openly queer. So then people conflate the expression of the queerness with the privilege, and so you go, well, homosexuality is immoral. It's like, no, there's just a bunch of immoral, self-involved homosexuals who make me ashamed to be one.
McCarthyism proved that in the 1950s.
Yeah.
Look at the witch hunts they had there for the so-called communist sympathizers. And how many of those witch hunters and prosecutors and persecutors alike were closeted homosexuals themselves? It reminds me of that series Angels in America. I lost a relative to AIDS. He was a wonderful, kind human being. He was my uncle, and I never really got to know him quite a bit, right? Because there was that kind of old family dynamic about, and he grew up in the 60s, so he didn't really get a chance to really be a part of our lives. But I was happy to get to know him, and I was really happy to have him in my life because he gave me such insight when it came to his lifestyle. And I was ever thankful for that. And he passed away in 1994. HIV, AIDS, it killed him. But he lived about 5 years with it, too. So that's kind of a brownie point there because they gave him a 3-year diagnosis. And when I watched Angels of America, it gave me a real insight on the belligerence, just the total nasty prejudice and the hatred for it. Like who you sleep with is irrelevant.
Yeah.
It's what you do to other people in the process. It's how you treat people. I don't care. Like say, I've used this adage in my show numerous times. I don't care if Bob and Steve get busy. I don't care if June and Edna get busy. Have all the fun you want. Let kids be kids.
Yeah.
Let them grow into it. If you find yourself, let's say, 20-something years old and you're starting to feel, okay, I'm this and I'm that, well, great, go with it. But like everything that we all do, it doesn't matter the job we pick or the education we go for or what we do with our time. We make a choice. We have to own it regardless. We got to take responsibility for our shit every goddamn day, regardless. And there's going to be repercussions, whether they're good or bad. We were taught this in basic science, right? Every action has a positive or negative reaction. Like,
Yeah, equal and
What other mantra can you say to deny people to be something?
Yeah.
Like I don't believe in drag queen story hour. I don't that. To me, that's just weird.
Well, there's a reason there ain't no bookish trans lesbian story hour. Actually, I was actually about to get into that. Because you mentioned feminazis earlier, and I find it really interesting because there's only two groups who managed to push back transition access by a couple decades in the West. And the first one were the Nazis, who burned the papers of the Hirschfeld Institute in the 30s. We were the first people they went after. And the second was the legacy feminist movement. In the late 70s and early Reagan administration, they cartelized through the federal government a whole bunch of private insurers against the provision of transition medicine. Janice Raymond, who Stephen Harper called upon to help criminalize sex work, actually said later on that, or said at the time, I contend that the problem of transsexuality would be best dealt with by morally mandating it out of existence. And you look at what happened there and how it was pushed back a couple decades, and now Gloria Steinem's like, oh, I'm sorry I said you were invalid, which is the best limited hangout I've ever seen. Her 2013 Advocate column is just like, oh, I'm sorry I said mean things about you. It wasn't about that. It was the fact that you and your buddies made sure that you got the government to recommend against provision of this medicine that saves friggin' lives, because you were trying to shove us back into the closet. Now it seems like what they're trying to do instead is co-opt the most privileged and force a whole bunch of sterilizing procedures and a whole bunch of conditions that cause people to want to kill themselves while they're waiting to buy this medicine that's safer than birth control, safer than aspirin, on them, so that we're good and we're desperate and we are just ripe for an absolute backlash. Like I saw a bill that was calling to ban hormone for adolescents, surgeries, Lupron, and hormones. And I'm like, I'm with you on two of those, because Luprons are friggin' poison, and surgery is an attempt to cisnormalize the community. But, you know, every adolescent has to have a puberty. And to say, well, there are people who regret the one that they had, is like, hey, me too.
Well, how can you regret something that's just going to naturally happen to you?
Well, how do you regret having type 1 diabetes? How do you regret not getting getting a blood transfusion? Like,
how do you regret getting your tonsils out?
Well, that one doesn't naturally happen. That one's prophylactic and probably actually also overdone. That one's been, like, there's more evidence indicating that those tonsils are good because they're a magnet for infection, and you're better off.
How about circumcision? I wasn't asked permission for that.
Yeah, no, I'm fully against that. And oh yeah, and when people
are like,
oh,
me, a baby,
yeah, and you're talking about 30 to 35% of the nerve endings of a functioning penis. The same rate of sexual dysfunction between genital reconstruction and circumcision. The same rate of sexual dysfunction between circumcision and Mullerian genital mutilation, or what's more commonly known as female genital mutilation. And all of a sudden, all of these folks on the fake left are like, well, if you talk about that, you're anti-Semitic. Oh, fuck you! Seriously, fucking fuck you! Like Jewish people are, like Jewish people are incapable of having enshrined a bad cultural practice. My cultural relativism ends when a fucking infant's penis begins. Like, fuck off.
Well, I got another statement here from Zyklon B there. Funny that you had touched on the historical reference, Crusty. I've talked to witnesses from World War II in Eastern Poland. Soviets are far worse from 39 to 41, then again 44 and 45 and onward. Yes, I agree. Because Stalin was just as evil, just as nasty as Adolf Hitler, right? The whole proletariat, the expansion, creating the Soviet Empire. Yes, I agree, Zyklon. Poland, poor Poland. Like, honestly, the past 100 years, like, really,
the past 400 years.
Well, exactly.
These are people who had a state for about 20 years in the interwar period. Let me put it this way. I think I understand why Arthur and David Pulaski are as, like, very, very worked up about encroaching totalitarianism the way they are. And I think it comes from being Polish. Not to be overly, ethnocentrist about it, but, like, yeah. These are people who, like, when you look at the Poles, they tried to do what we consider genocide now, like refuse to educate them in their own language, go after cultural practices. They vivisected their state. And that was before the World War II and the Nazis and the Stalinists. And I got to say, the Stalinists were not the proletariat; they were just a new managerial class wearing baggier clothes.
Well, they just tried to carry on Lenin's legacy, and it failed.
Yeah,
Mind you, Lenin's legacy was I don't. When I studied him in high school, I was not impressed with him.
No,
I was not. Because well, it was when I was 16, yeah, I thought the proletariat was pretty cool. I thought communism was pretty cool. Yeah, but 6 months of my life, I thought, yeah, communism. Then Tiananmen Square happened.
Yeah.
So, and then the Romanian Revolution happened.
Yeah.
And then shortly thereafter, around 1990, 91, then the Cold War was fucking done. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, cool, what's going to happen now?
Yeah.
This is great because I was in my punk rock days, I had the mohawk and shit. And I was like, yeah, do your own thing, basically, kind of like a polite anarchy per se, but
kind of a punk amazing. Like Gavin, like Gavin McInnes is kind of a punk, used to be
kind of, yeah.
Probably not like Gavin. Yeah.
No, I got, I would love to sit and have a good chat with Gavin too.
You and me both.
I know he went through hell though for being a conservative and being associated with the Proud Boy issue too.
Yeah.
And some of the ways he was investigated and treated by even his own neighbors. So it gets kind of scary, but
yeah,
when I look at
it's ugly because it's like if you look, I haven't seen the Proud Boys do anything nearly as terroristic as Rose City Antifa did to Andy No. That attack on that guy for freaking wrongthink, and then they go, he's not a journalist. Well, this, by the way, is why I'm concerned when the Trudeau government starts licensing journalists. This is why I'm like,
do you have your papers? Do you have your card? Yes.
Yeah. I'm not on the same page as my favorite writer, Credential Boy Aaron Sorkin, when he's like, we should license journalists. I'm like, no, you want shitty journalism? Because that's how you get really shitty state-led journalism. You do not have freedom of the press that way. You have a series of credentialist hoops to jump through. So you've got that person who's like, oh, I've got a history degree, therefore I know the Weimar era better. Jordan Peterson has training in political science, and he's a psychiatrist or psychologist. I don't believe he has historical training, but I think he understands the history of what happened during that regime better because his discipline let him approach it with a different tool set. And I keep trying to remind people, it's like, when they say, well, we're going to fix this with hate speech laws and internet censorship. There were 200 hate speech trials of the Nazis, and everyone was a recruiting field day. It's you want to talk about how totalitarian fascism comes around. It's when liberals start, spewing that paradox of tolerance bullshit. No, the paradox is you have to be tolerant of intolerance because that's the only way you get people to recognize that, a free and open government that includes people who make your blood boil is better than a totalitarian government enforcing official ideology. Like,
well, say, for example, if you and I were at some kind of rally and there's some shithead who gets to the microphone and he or she starts spewing this anti-Semitic or anti-Christian or pro-white or pro-black or pro-Asian, whatever.
Heckle his ass.
It'd be like, what is this crap? What is, okay, what are you talking about? Okay, but as much as I believe in free speech, okay, let that person speak. Let that person speak. I'm not going to go out of my way and say, oh, police officer, this person dropped an M-bomb, or this person called me a cracker, or this person called my friend a dirty this or a dirty that. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to sit, I'll just listen, and I'll probably know you're full of shit to begin with. But okay, speak your mind. But then if I'm speaking my mind when it comes to collectivism isn't your friend, it's not going to help you in the long run. It's not going to help you with your tax dollars or your money. And then someone says, oh, that's a hateful thing. Why would you say that? Like, what is that? No, we got those chips in the freezer. Like they're the wedges, dear. So. Okay. So anyway.
You got a really good point there. That like, and that's the problem. Like, who defines what's hate? Who defines?
Well, that's the thing.
Who defines? Yeah, and it's always somebody with an agenda, and that agenda is never socially just. Like, everyone needs to take a deep knee bend and watch the Avenue Q musical. Everyone's a little bit racist or classist or ableist or whatever the fuck bullshit you got going on, and just like recognize that the best solution to oppression is democracy. The best solution to oppression is freedom, and you're never gonna like. completely eliminate people doing bad things to other people for arbitrary reasons, because the average person can manage about 150 relationships in their head. You know, nobody can love everyone equally. It would be nice if you could, but we're not wired that way. So we got to recognize that everyone's got a little bit of a right to be an a-hole to everyone, and just build a society where we have basic rights that are respected, we have basic entitlements that are respected, and let everyone work it out. Any politician who's promising you that they can end racism or sexism or anything like that is just selling you a big bag of bullshit.
Well, that's like saying we're going to stop heckling at hockey games and we're going to stop heckling at this sports game. That's not going to happen. Like that's.
Do you want to stop fun at sports games now? Is that what we have? Like, no, heckling is good. I'm a big fan of heckling. I'm a big fan of, you know, I was in model parliament a couple of times. You get to sit in the legislature and you get to debate stuff. And, you know, heckling made me, a little bit of heckling from the other side made me a better debater and made it so that I'd have to continue on saying what I was saying. And you also get a few ribs in there that are good. I was sitting with the young Tories because the very cliquish young New Democrats didn't want me to sit with them the first time.
Oh, the cool kids.
Yeah. No, I know. Which included Phillips and Hoffman. So it's fun to still be dealing with this crew. I'm looking forward to continuing to hold them to account. But we're debating a transportation bill, and one member from the Alliance pipes up and says, "Let's have another high-speed ferry to BC." I just go, typical. The Alliance. Always against the ferries.
Starship Troopers Utopia. Have you read the book Starship Troopers, Valerie?
I haven't read the book. I've seen the movie, and I've seen a lot of the breakdowns that Carl Benjamin does about it. And I think citizenship as service is not the worst way to go about it. It's just a question of, like, who do we have define the service? That's why I've gotten to the point where it's like my freedom dividend when I go and campaign on it again. It's going to be a citizen's income.
Who are we going to fight for this service? That's the thing. Who are we getting sized up for now? Because in Starship Troopers, it was intergalactic.
Yeah.
It was like your pseudo. You want these privileges? You want this? Okay.
Yeah. Fighting a genocidal enemy that wants us all gone. Yeah. But if we fight them and we don't humanize these mass murdering insects in the right way, apparently we're Nazis. This is where the fake left has just like they've lost their freaking minds, which is why we're canceling Dr. Seuss now for doing propaganda cartoons.
Oh God! Really?
Even though the guy has written books that are against, that are literally like trying to illustrate the idea of why race is, more socially constructed than we acknowledge, and why it's bad to be racist. Like, which is not to say, like, whenever someone says I'm not racist, I'm like, oh, you are getting so suckered by the fake left when you do that.
Yeah.
Whenever anyone tries to don't act like you're without sin. Don't act like you've never cracked a joke. Don't act like you've never laughed in a way that made Dave Chappelle uncomfortable. Don't, because it's the best way to get owned by these people. They are very, very intelligent and skilled manipulators, and they know exactly what they're doing when they drop that ad hom on you. The best thing to go is like, sure, everyone is a little bit. I'm not going to deny that I'm free of problematic ideas. Neither are you. That's what I did at my speech in Edmonton on the 20th. Is like, all right, let's talk about some problematic ideas you guys have. Let's talk about
one at a time.
Yeah.
Well, it's like the Sanko.
I hate everyone equally. I used to have a keychain that said that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's like the intro to my show too. You know, you're all equally worthless. You got to prove it. You got to prove yourself worthy, whether it's to yourself or to your loved ones or your family. You've got to prove something. And it doesn't matter of color or creed. I've worked with many varieties of people, all shapes, all sizes, all orientations too. And it never fazed me. What I would expect from my troops is that I give a timing, soldiers show up. If you don't show up, well, you get punished. It's that simple. Because if you don't show up for your team, then what's going on here? That's what it comes down to. And when I was coaching sports, it was the same thing. You guys work together. I don't care who the star is. I'm not here to promote stars. I'm here to promote a team, right? And if I think you have potential to go farther, then I had the paperwork to process to give to the Alberta Lacrosse Association or to the Alberta Soccer Association. And they would send people to check you out if that was the case. Okay. But until that, I would try to incorporate a proper teamwork, because if you're with 10 guys in a firefight, you got to rely on each other big time. It's the same thing when you got 4 or 5 firefighters going into a house to find that victim, or
Yeah.
4 or 5 police officers trying to stop a bank robbery or to help that person that's been apprehended. You got to rely on your teammates.
Like
and
you
what
say,
I
that's
find,
collectivism time. Those kind of groups.
that's when it works. Yeah. That's when it works. Whether it takes 15 minutes or 15 hours to get the job done, you've got to do it, because you're doing a mission for something greater than your feelings or your degree or whatever credentials you think you have. Okay. And that's what gets me with our federal government too, because they work together as a team to stick it in you. They don't work together as a team to help Canada or the greater good. Okay. And I'm just going to plug something here too there, Valerie.
Sure.
For those interested, there is rumors of a election that might be happening in the next few months. So I'm not here to actually campaign, but I will plug the Veterans Coalition Party of Canada, a grassroots party based on common principles. You work hard, you get ahead, you try to be fair. Equality of opportunity, not equality of outcome, right? We're looking at all the party structures, and there's not enough cohesion looking out for the little guys. So if you'd like to know, please follow the address at the bottom of your screen, Veterans Coalition Party of Canada, to find more details. I am a candidate for the Crowfoot Battle River riding. So if you'd like to have more information, please send me an email or contact the Veterans Coalition Party of Canada and get details and sign up today. So here's a thing from I'm a Kulik. Ironic naming, I'm a Kulik. Collectivism is when society puts the good of the group above the rights of the individual. Has little to do with teamwork. Well, you're right. The idea of the so-called greater collective, but the good of the group ends up being the group ends up being the few people in the party.
Yeah, exactly. Do you want to fuck over the group? Because this is how you fuck over the group. Like, capitalism is fantastic because you get insane innovations that make someone, nut bar wealthy. But at the same time, like, everyone ultimately benefits if you structure it right. If you let it become this rentier crony capitalist thing, like where it's not about rewarding innovations, it's about rewarding big players. And the worst part is that the innovators can become those big players and those system gamers. Like,
and that's the test too. That's the test. Yeah. That's
the difference between capitalist and crony capitalist. That's the difference between real innovation and the Gilded Age. Like, Rockefeller deserved to become immensely wealthy for revolutionizing the rail transport of oil. He did not deserve to get wealthier for gaming the oil industry and making it harder for people to get energy and buying off governments and disrupting the production of alternative fuels. This is where I break with Thomas Sowell. It's like, he deserved to get pretty rich. He didn't deserve to get as rich as he did, and he didn't deserve to have the influence over government he did. And neoliberals kind of are like, oh, well, big economic actors, that's part of the reward. You innovate, and then you choke all other innovation to death. We nearly didn't have the Industrial Revolution because of James Watt's patent on the steam engine. And it stopped all potential improvements on that design for 20 years. So that by 1800, people in Britain still had the same per capita GDP as in Africa, despite this absolutely revolutionary invention that should have completely already been shaking Britain to its foundations.
Mike, the pipe boss, likes to say a society-based accountability tends to be far less corrupt than one based on perceived injustices and excuses for disgusting behavior. Canada's leadership isn't interested in leading. Yeah, that's been proven. We know that. But great point there, Mike. Excellent point. Because really, when you look at the past 10 years, and I'm sizing you up here, Valerie. Okay, the past 10 years. Okay, I would say economically, Harper did a better job. Socially and politically, we'll have to see. Valerie, you want to take that away?
Yeah, Stephen Harper was part of the move to turn Canada into a staggeringly unaccountable economic basket case. That's my view. First of all, don't start like moving away from paying down debt and increasing spending and increasing tax giveaways during a boom, and then play so shocked when a giant financial crisis hits, when any economist worth their salt knew that we were already running over speed. Like, he cut taxes going into the recession. You do that after the recession. That's when this is one thing that Keynes was right about. The boom, not the slump, is the time for austerity. And Harper did not want austerity. His microeconomic management was shit on a stick. Let's see, he went after coal plants once again. As I said, coal plants instead of methane. His buddies were in the natural gas industry. He went after, he's been part of this neoliberal push against coal as the fossil fuel, because again, it's that Luntzian terminology, carbon. They want to talk about carbon because it hits people like, oh, it's like soot, it's particulate. It's like, no, if you're literally, yes, exactly. And again, we need to be having that debate, because I'm like, the fake left has completely discredited themselves over the last few decades on this, and it's like, I didn't want to be a skeptic of this. They've made it impossible for me not to be. Secondly, the GST has the same enforcement costs, whether it's 5%, 7%, or 10%. So either abolish it or increase it. Cutting it from 7 to 5 just meant that for every $5 you raised, you were spending $1 in compliance costs, instead of for every $7 you raised, you were spending $1 in compliance costs. Consumption taxes can make a lot of economic sense. Oh, and there's the fact that he took a big fat wet crap on parliamentary supremacy. Like, I'm sorry, but when people who demonstrate that they're about to have the votes to get you out of office show up and have a press conference saying, we're about to hold a confidence vote, you don't go to the governor general and be like, let's not have parliament right now. No. You can say socialist separatist coalition all you want, and I can oppose a socialist separatist coalition, but it's worth noting, if you want to strengthen federalism, maybe letting separatists sometimes have a share of the job of governing the entire country wouldn't be the worst thing. I believe that the issue with Western separatism was that the West wants in, right? So maybe that means that, Parliament is supposed to be extreme. This is a guy who ducked accountability at every friggin' turn. And he destroyed the taking of statistics in this country. He went after Statistics Canada hammer and tongs. And that's how we get Prime Minister Tweety Bird able to make up whatever he feels good about. That's my other nickname for the Right Honourable Justin the Callor.
The twat waffle himself, yes.
Twat.
Well, yeah, I have no respect. I have no respect for him at all. No. When it comes to Harper, I would say we still had more money. He did pull us out through the financial crisis. We did not get the same sting as our American friends did, and some of our British friends. But he also promoted the whole government bailout thing too, which I was totally disagreeing with, because if you have to constantly rely on government bailouts, then you're not running your company properly. Bombardier had that sting too. Every government since I think 1980 has had a bailout for Bombardier. Bombardier has had every 10 years, they've had some excuse for something, or every 5 or 6 years. And that's what just gets me. It's like, well, who's running your show then?
And with SNC Lavalin, they get a legal bailout. They get to avoid responsibility that everyone else gets. It's true that we got through the financial crisis, but we got through the financial crisis at far greater cost to our fiscal position than we otherwise could have. You don't run stimulus before the recession. You run stimulus after. And so we had a much larger deficit than we could have had. That was tens of billions of dollars that we threw away. We're worse at governing ourselves because of what he did to statistics taking. We're worse at having a functioning parliament. Like we talk about CPC MPs, like, why don't they stand up? Why don't they stand up? Well, because he lopped all of their balls off. He made it good and certain that like MPs were afraid to do their jobs. Now, a lot of that's on them, but a lot of that's on him too. Leaders are supposed to lead and not just bully people.
Yeah. It was I'm
sorry, Harper was a fucking bully. I don't have the same respect for that guy.
Yeah, he was, and Trudeau is no different. He just has someone else dictate it for him. Right? Canadian Conservatives equate to Liberals light. My party of choice will be the VCP, PPC, or Canadian Republican, whoever has the best chance of dethroning our Prince of Socks.
Prince of Socks, that's a new one.
Exactly. The simple act of humility, Now, I'm not going to be one of those anti-Trudeauers who say I want him shot or I want to hit with him a brick.
No.
I'd like to throw bricks at his limousine just for shits and giggles. I'd also like to see him humbled, but we're not going to see that in the light of day anytime soon. So if they do call a federal election right now, I'd like to see him defeated just like the Ontario Liberals were by the Doug Ford Nation, down to maybe 1-2 seats tops.
That ended well.
Yeah.
God, Ford.
1 second there, Valerie.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, too.
No. When people call for politicians to be shot, it's like, do you want a worse version of the politician you just called to be shot? Because that's how you get a worse version of the politician you just called for to be shot.
Well, shot with a ball of his own shit. That seems fair. Well, poop on face, egg on face.
No,
that works.
Again, plays right into their hands. Plays right into their hands every time. It's don't get me wrong. It's emotionally satisfying to think about. I could think about a certain member statement I saw in the legislature about the Notley-Kratz who spent millions of dollars perpetuating a queer crisis of choice against the trans community that kills more people than street violence does, talking about their opposition to violence against transgender people. I love these people like Derek Fildebrandt can say trans. Why can't you say trans? Oh, right, because you gotta have your little weasel wording in. And don't get me wrong, it was very emotionally satisfying to think about what I would have done if I had a cinder block in front of me when I was in the gallery. But there's a difference between that and actually enacting violence against people and calling for violence against people, because then they get to play the victim, and they're not. They're victimizers, and we shouldn't let our perfectly natural human desire to enact violence on people who do violence distract from the violence that they commit.
Well, you can sit there and say the old adage, violence never begets violence. But when I look at World War I and World War II, that was a different story. The last thing I want to see in this country is the amount of violence that came together over the George Floyd incident.
Yeah.
Right. Where you're seeing legitimate businesses and owners of all colors and creeds literally being destroyed because of a falsehood. Now, yes, it was a white police officer that held that man down. Okay. There's also
in a dangerous and irresponsible fashion. I think we
exactly.
Even if he had enough fentanyl in his system to kill someone his size, that doesn't necessarily mean that he would have expired if he hadn't had his oxygen choked off and he wasn't
exactly.
No, that was massively irresponsible. The problem has been, and it's been pointed out, it's like, it wasn't just people of every creed. It was disproportionately black-owned businesses that were destroyed. It was disproportionately, like, when people talk about, we'll defund the police to fund social workers, it's like, I trust social workers about as much as I trust cops. They're equally good at being sniffy and deciding who lives and who dies and letting their petty prejudices come out. It's like, no, I would just like police to stop to be police again instead of a well-funded street gang that goes out looking to crack heads, and that does mean
that's a few bad apples out of a batch, because I know a lot of police officers personally that would never even do that. If they knew they were in danger, they would react as they should, as they were trained. And then you could sit there and have all the so-called cubicle experts sitting around saying, well, he should have done this, and true, but there were also some police officers standing around watching him do it too. So that's more of a training doctrine, if anything. But for a nation to sit there and say, let's defund the police, and then a handful of our politicians to weigh in and say, we should defund the police too, like Mayor Nenshi out of Calgary, right? And Mr. NDP, I'll pull the race card out every time I want to, saying the same thing. It's like, well, firstly, do we really have that problem in Canada? Do we have the same?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think we necessarily have a problem with police per se so much as what they're ordered to do. But I mean, we have cops who ignore a lot of decades of case law that's pretty clear on probable cause and when you're supposed to demand someone's papers, please. So we do kind of have that problem. But the thing is, it isn't nearly as racial as the fake left wants to pretend it is. It's a little bit more like it's a lot more gender based. It's a lot more poverty based. And I pointed that out in my speech on the 20th. I pointed out, like, someone who is white with a penis has twice the chance of getting carded in Edmonton as someone who is black with a vagina. And I said this too. I tried to explain to the organizers of Justice for Emil, who was like this 11-year-old black kid who was like treated terribly by his teachers for showing up with the do-rags. Oh, the wrong part of his head's covered in a way that makes someone feel unsafe. So, once again, familiar. And none of the NDP were there calling for an apology from the school board, because the NDP are busy, like, for them, teachers' salaries matter a hell of a lot more than Black lives, and it was nice to see their ideology on display. But the people behind Justice for Emil, they wanted to make it all about anti-blackness. And I'm like, look, do you think if Emil was female assigned, they would have gone through this? I don't. And so that's why his mom got a lot of hate mail, because when you pretend it's a one issue thing, if you pretend it's a one intersection thing, that's where social justice politics falls down. I'm in favor of social justice Tory, or instead of these social justice warrior types. It's like, you got to look at things systemically. You got to be able to be talking about things structurally, instead of like this individual case and this personal slight and this viral video of the moment.
That gets me too when these politicians talk about systemic racism, and yet every time you watch the CPAC channel or Question Period, when you're seeing Views of Parliament, how much diversity do you see? I see lots of women. I see lots of different minorities. I see lots of different representation in the House of Commons. So when I hear Jagmeet Singh talking about, oh, the country is systemic, it's like, well, if that was the case, sir, you would not be elected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
honestly, if you're going to take the word racism and use it to its literal sense, you would have not been elected. You would not be allowed to go in your riding and do anything. If you want to compare the so-called projected racism you see in Canada to what happened during the Jim Crow laws in the United States, you would not see that. So when these guys talk about racism and division and all this, I think that they are creating it more than what the common people are. Because we're constantly being told about it. We're constantly being reminded of it. I've dealt with individuals that say, well, I'm black, I can't do this. Who the hell told you that?
Yeah.
Who the hell told you?
And it's true. Some of that is definitely internalized. And I think part of the difference too is that we need to recognize, like, there is a difference between, and this is a point that the left makes and they make it fairly, there's a difference between systemic and hegemonic. Just because Jagmeet Singh might have had a little bit of a harder road to hoe with some people who were like, I'm never going to vote for a guy with a turban, doesn't mean he can't succeed. Just because I'm going to get questions like, is this a guy or a girl? And by the way, I'm a girl. It just took me a while to figure it out, Ivan. Doesn't mean I can't succeed. But it does mean that, like, we don't have equality of opportunity yet. And we have to work towards it, and part of the way we work towards it is we put opportunity and the ability to recognize talent in more people's hands, and that's why I ran on the freedom dividend when I ran for the Freedom Conservative leadership. Okay, well, I do recognize we do have a quality of opportunity in this country. It's just some people, like you said, might have to work a bit harder to do it. Well, then that's not equality of opportunity. That is some people get a few more opportunities. Some people get a few more shots.
Well, and that's the thing. That's if I work 45 hours a week and I want to make some extra money, I might have to do 60 hours a week. Yeah. Right?
And some people can get the overtime and some people can't, because some people are seen as trustworthy.
And if I'm lucky to have the opportunity to get the overtime, then bless me, great. Take advantage of the opportunity too. I find that some people just get into this tune where, okay, if I'm not comfortable doing this, I don't want to do it. Say, well, comfort's not a right. Comfort's something you
exactly. My rights don't end where your feelings begin. And I said that when I was protesting the so-called Women's March in 2017. And I said this to this one, like, freaking camp counselor of this legacy feminist, like, my rights don't end where your feelings begin. She goes, yes, they do. That one stayed in my head for a long time.
Well, it looks like I have a concerned voter. I will not vote for you.
Well, and see, there's the 1/3 of the Canadian public says they won't vote for, a chick with a dick, and I gotta have that discussion. That's fine. I don't need, well, I shouldn't say I don't need you. I need, votes that I can get, but I'm writing a book, 12 Rules for Leftists, and one of my 12 rules is campaigns are about persuading for the future, not winning today. You got to have discussions. And I've had plenty of people not vote for me before. So
well,
you're in a very, very inclusive fraternity there, Ivan.
Well, so that's the thing. If I get into the federal politics, and I hope that my viewers and voters, if they're out there, you look at me as a person that's willing to do the hard work, to get things done, fighting to the best of its ability and to my ability too. I will stand in Parliament, and I will say magical words like no, for starters. I know I won't agree with a certain bill based on fear. I would agree with the bill if it's based on something factual, not just skepticism or a half-assed nanos poll that I've never seen any of these polls. Have you seen these polls, Valerie, anywhere around when they talk about these national polls?
Well, which national?
For example, when it came to what Canadians wanted for safety, when Bill Blair was always getting on talking about C-21, he was talking about the nanos poll. I've never seen a poll when it comes to gun safety.
Yeah, and there's a lot of push polling. I mean, yes, Minister and yes, Prime Minister covered that well. Where you can get people to come to the conclusions you want, and those who pay the piper call the tune. Ima Kulak has a good point here. Individuals in the system being racist doesn't make the system itself racist. They need to be able to point to a specific law or cultural practice. Well, all due respect to Margaret Thatcher, but cultures are made up of individuals. And we have data in the U.S. that shows that there is a sentencing gap, that when black people commit the same crime and they're sentenced in the same way, they get a slightly longer sentence, but male-assigned people get 6 times that gap. So, like I keep saying, it's like structural racism is a thing. It's not the only thing. It's not even the primary thing at this point. There's so much more than that. And when you just focus on a couple of variables, you end up distorting things, and it's a recipe for the most privileged people who say, oh, I have this particular race card I can play. I have this particular woman card I can play. Go on and on and on, basically screwing over the members of the community they claim to represent, because they're a bunch of ward-healing scumfucks, who are just like, look at me, I'm a person of color in a position of power, therefore enjoy your psychological wage, other people I'm fucking over. And I'm like, I have no fucking time for politicians like that. I would prefer never to have to play identity politics, but I'm in politics and I have an identity. It's fucking unavoidable.
Oh, we all do. We all have an identity. We all have something we want to say and do. I'm pro-democratic. I'm pro-gun rights, pro-property rights. I'm pro-capitalism. I want people to get ahead. I want to see the construction worker build a home, come home to his or her wife and say, hey, look what I got.
Yeah.
I want to see people take their kids on holiday. I want to see people have good Christmases. I like to see people get in their car and not worry about some greenie or some NDP or giving them shit for using gasoline. I want to see people grow hemp. I want to see the production of hemp. I would like to see crops flourish. I want to see farmers get ahead. I want to see them pay off their land. I don't want to see them pay tax for heating their product. I don't want to see tax upon tax for heating products and using the resources we have based on our own innovations to get something done.
Yeah, we're a cold country.
Well, exactly. I don't want to see the UN step in and tell us how we have to live our lives and do things.
Yeah,
I want to see our military flourish. I want to see our seniors get a minimum of $1,250 or $1,300 a month for CPP, because we've all paid into it. I would like to see a pay cut of our federal ministers, especially our federal ministers. From 182 is their base salary. I want to see them cut down to at least 125. I want to abolish the Governor General's position to a point where they're not getting a ridiculous pension over something stupid. And if we're going to keep the appointment, then we either elect someone to be the Governor General, or we have someone appointed based on merit, proper merit. Not because
you need a constitutional law professor when you have a Governor General. It's true.
Or that's a constitutional lawyer, someone who understands the laws of the land.
That said, we tried that with Barack Obama, and it turned out he was really good at disrespecting his own constitution. So, I don't know. I've often said that maybe we should have the Queen's representative just be chosen at random from all voters. Because they're supposed to be a monarch, they're supposed to represent.
Have a lottery.
Yeah. There you go. There's a reason.
Lottery. You get $50,000 a year.
Yeah, and then show up and vote. You can be Canada's king. Yeah, you can go through the streets like throwing Canadian Tire money out of the sack.
That and poppies and Kit Kats and Tim Hortons. There you go.
Yeah,
right
there
on.
you go.
Here's a hockey puck for you. It's December. Enjoy. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. So
What is the Gladue report?
I
actually don't know that
familiar.
one.
But I'll take a few more questions, folks. I'll have to shut this down here. So, Ivan, what is the matter with the VCP? What's the matter with it, Ivan Zuchuk? Is that your question? There's nothing the matter with the VCP. Nothing. We're all varieties of people. We come from all walks of life. Some are veterans, some are ex-doctors, some are ex-lawyers, some are ex-liberals, some are ex-conservatives, surprisingly enough. It's gaining momentum. So I'll put the address up there for you all if you want to see the Veterans Coalition Party again. It's a new party. It's in the works. You know, we have the same principles as the PPC, but we share basically common conservative, liberal, and common sense values. But we want responsible government. We don't want different tax hikes. We want people to get ahead. It's that simple. We want pay cuts for the people that take too much of the cream on top. We all know that the more cream you have, the more your milk's going to sour. So let's cut the top just a little bit here, right?
And if, ladies and gentlemen, Douglas parable of the cream separator. Yeah. Well, speaking of when socialists were actually, the kind of people we could stand. But yeah,
if you want to get a hold of Valerie, you can find just the bottoms of the screen here. You can contact Valerie at minds.com, Valerie Keefe, gab.com, Valerie Keefe, parlor.com, Valerie Keefe, rumble.com, Citizen Keefe, and facebook.com, Keefe 4HN. Please give her an email, send her a compliment, send her a two. She's well-educated, decent human being, and just a down-to-earth fucking person. And we need more of that, ladies and gentlemen. So I'll get a few more questions in here before we shut this down. Let's see here.
Ivan, why are you disappointed with the VCP? I'm just curious to know what's your issue with them.
Okay, Ivan, I hope you're not saying that because I have a trans person on my show. I hope you're not saying that because I personally don't care how anyone identifies as long as they do it well, do the best of their ability. Right? My lifestyle is not compromised because I have Valerie on here. My lifestyle is not compromised because there's a few other people in Edmonton that might do interpretive dance. Yeah. I don't care. What I care about is that people get together and get along and enjoy our prosperity and freedom with peace and security and democracy to the finest letter of the law.
Yeah.
Right? I'm a Kulik. I'd much rather see veterans calling the shots than lawyers and journalists. Thank you. I'm a Kulik. I would like
a few of those. Yeah.
I give solitude and I give accolades to lawyers, people who can sit in a classroom and listen to the verbal diarrhea when it comes to understanding the law. I can appreciate that. The 7 years of training, go for the bar exam, whatever the procedure may be in Canada. But in the same sense, we have too many lawyers in Parliament right now.
Yeah.
That don't practice law. They just practice conniving ways. Okay. Yeah. It's the same thing as medical professionals telling us about masks and stuff. I'm not questioning the credibility of any doctor out there who's saying, okay, this is what I need you to do. Okay. But if you haven't practiced medicine for a period of 10 years, as far as I'm concerned, you're null and void. Right. Honestly,
Yeah. We're seeing a lot of that out of these public health officers who ignore.
Well, Dr. Tam especially. Yeah. One minute you're saying no mask. 1 minute you're saying another mask, and then gloves. Next minute, her and Patty Haydu are talking about wearing 2 masks. And then they're both telling you to stick your ding-dong into a fucking glory hole. For what? That used to be a running joke when I was in high school. It was within a health procedure.
Well, yeah. It's so interesting. Like flight restrictions, when 100% of cases were coming from abroad, those are racist. Now we're going to stick you in a quarantine hotel when fewer than 2 cases can be attributed in any way flights. Can you put Ivan's last comment up? Because he and I agree. We just disagree on the way in which I was born by God. Okay. Yeah. We both agree. I don't pick a gender. I was made to pretend I was one. I wasn't. But we have midbrains. There's cis women, when they get more testosterone in their system, they get depressed. You look at polycystic ovarian syndrome. You look at premenstrual dysphoria disorder, where like during the period, androgens spike, estrogens crash, and you get people who are like suicidal in the same way that trans women get suicidal. Even The Guardian reported on this 5 years ago, because once again, cis women most affected. The Guardian 5 years ago was talking about how the birth control pill is related to depression in cis women. And in fact, if you were on a progesterone-only pill, you were more likely to have depression than if you were on a progesterone estrogen pill. Because progesterone metabolizes into testosterone, metabolizes into DHT. So, yeah, I totally agree. I'm born that way.
I agree with that too.
If your conception of human sexuality is that of the dumb kid in kindergarten cop, that it's boys have a penis, girls have a vagina, we're just going to have to disagree. But okay. I want you to have the right to say what you want, Ivan. Exactly. And that's the difference between me and Marnie Panis. That's the difference between me and a lot of these, flounce gender, I want to make someone use my pronouns more than I want the government to stop denying people the right to buy basic medicine. Because the only way that you ever get anyone to understand anything or to change their view on anything is to dialogue with them. But yeah, we both agree. You don't pick a gender. You're born that way by God. Or, whatever force in the universe you happen to think is the case. So that's simply is to start with.
That's the thing. And that's the thing. It's like, if God told you you have to be this, then also God gave you the incentive to use your brain and live your life to the best of your ability. I'm not a believer in the Lord. I'm not condemning anybody who is. I say too, but the laws that govern me are basically the morals that I was taught as a child. You don't lie, you don't cheat, you don't steal. You don't have to be a Christian to believe in that. You don't have to be an atheist to believe in that. You don't have to be a Muslim to believe in that. You don't have to be Jewish. You don't have to be a Buddhist. It's how you treat people. It's your perception. If I look at you and I say, hey, you're pretty cool, great, we can get along.
Yeah.
You turn around and give me a cuff upside the head for being bald, well, we're going to have a problem.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
Exactly.
I don't care what it is. It's like letting people do their thing, living their lives to the best of their abilities. Don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, and do what you can to help people out to the best of your ability. And like I said, into my show. So we'll take a couple more minutes, ladies and gentlemen, get a couple more questions in, and then we'll shut her down for another exciting evening of the Thursday Fastball with Crusty Canuck. I say again, my guest tonight is Valerie Keefe. Educated official, political activist, Edmontonian, and proud Canadian, nonetheless. Decent human being. You can find her at minds.com/Valerie Keefe, gab.com/Valerie Keefe, parlor.com, Valerie Keefe, rumble.com, Citizen Keefe, facebook.com/Keefe4HN. Please don't be shy. Are you part of the panel this Sunday too again, or what's the scoop?
You gotta ask Adam, but I think so. I'm not 100% sure. He can let us know then. I always hope so. I'm back in this because I got a lot to say. I was very blissfully retired from politics for 14 years, and the stakes are too damn high now.
Well, now it's more effort. We need more people to get out there and get the common sense approach again too.
Yeah.
So I'd say
that reminds me. You say common sense an awful lot, and Lewis Black has a really good counterpoint to that. He says the problem with common sense is it ain't that friggin' common. Well, no, I did not serve in the armed forces. I did a tour of duty in Alberta schools. That's where I got my PTSD from, Ivan.
Okay. Understood.
Yeah.
And really, it'd be up to us to enforce the common sense thing. So a few more questions, ladies and gentlemen, and then we'll shut her down. So like I said, I've been Crusty Canuck. If you like and hear what you see, by all means, please consider donating too. Anything you like to donate, by all means. I like to make this a full-time commitment. It's going to take listeners and viewers such as yourself to make that happen. I try to get at least 2 episodes in the podcast up every week. I'm also part of the panel of the Adam Daniel Mosé Hidden Gem live stream, where we sit and discuss social issues, political issues, and just an all-around great discussion with working adults that we just want to make light of today's darkness. We make fun of the COVID thing. We make fun of our politicians, each other, and we have a great effing time. My guest tonight has been Valerie Keefe. Like I say, you can contact Valerie at the following: on minds.com, Valerie Keefe, gab.com, Valerie Keefe, parlor.com, Valerie Keefe, rumble.com, Citizen Keefe, and on facebook.com, Keefe, 4HN. So
I
if
won't
there's
have a
no
lot
more,
to say there for the next 3 weeks. I got zucked for calling someone who called me a narcissistic sociopath.
you're a doughhead. No, you're a doughhead.
Yeah. Only one of them gets punished. That should tell you something.
Well, it's like I said when I lost that job at the base gym for having an opinion. It was
Yeah.
just ridiculous because I never got to see my accuser. And, I was escorted out of the building. And I remember looking at the individual and I said, no, I know my way around here. I did some training in here. I trained soldiers in here. Oh, are you sure? I'm like,
no, I know. We got a lot of kangaroo court cuntiness going on. I know.
Oh, okay. I like that. Kangaroo court cunting. I love it. Yes. I might use that in my next episode. So anyhow, you've got I'm a Kulik there. You got a fan here. I found Valerie on Facebook. We'll follow. My band is over. Well done. I'm a Kulik.
Try to get on Alt Tech too. I'm a Kulik because we need to start building up more relationships there. We need to start breaking down these companies that think that they can control the public discussion. But
that's that thing. If you build your media platform, then by all means, let me be your first show. I would love to make this provincial or national too. I know I'm getting some subscribers, but yeah, all the better.
I got to start learning how to do the streaming thing. It's definitely not the bun fight. What's that a reference to?
Baking. I can bake a nice loaf of bread. I don't know if I can make buns, but if you want me to throw bread at people, sure.
Have you gotten into sourdoughing yet?
Not yet. I really enjoy a good loaf of sourdough, though, so I might attempt that. So
the nice thing about that too is both it improves the macronutrition of the thing, and it's an idiot-proof way to make a good, like the best green onion cake I've ever had, where you just use the starter and some oil, some sesame seed, green onion, salt, and you're there. Because you don't just have to make bread with it, but it's a great way to live cheaply on some base staples. And if those of us who are preparing for things to go really pear-shaped, I know, Crusty's been saying we might have to stand by because things might get really hairy. It's forewarned is forearmed. Learn how to make some stuff from scratch. I do pickling now, and when you pickle your own vegetables and you lacto ferment them, you get vitamin K2, which it seems we're all deficient in. And vitamin K2 is the thing that tells your body where to put the calcium so it doesn't put it in your arteries and it puts it in your bones and teeth.
Nice. Okay. Keep that in mind.
Yeah. That's why most D3 supplements now are D3K2.
Okay, well, we're going to shut her down tonight, folks. Like I said, my guest has been Valerie Keefe, Edmontonian, political, social activist, all-around decent human being. So please feel free to click like and subscribe, share this around. I have been Crusty Canuck, and you, my audience, have been awesome again tonight. Thank you very much for the subscriptions and the kind words. I want to thank you, Valerie, for joining me on this show tonight. And we'll probably have you on again in the next little while.
I hope so. It was a lot of fun.
That's great. I'm glad you came out.
Keep those fun questions coming.
Well, I'm sure they will.
I hope so.
Alrighty. So on that note, like I said, I've been Crusty Canuck, folks. Remember, like I always say, humanity merit wins the day. Take care and see you in the next episode. Bye for now.